Okay, welcome everyone. I'd like to call our meeting to order. Madam Clerk, please read the adequate notice compliance statement.
Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by the City Clerk's office in preparation of the special meeting notice dated May 22nd, 2024, which was properly distributed and posted per statutory requirements. Please be advised that fire exits are to my right, your left, and at the back of the room. The city has a listening system to assist the hearing impaired. If anyone needs hearing assistance, please obtain the system at the dais and return it thereafter.
Excellent, thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Boyer.
Here.
Ms. Hamlet.
Here.
Mr. Miniger.
Here.
Mr. Pulaski.
Here.
Mr. Smallwood.
Here.
Mr. Vartan.
Present.
President Allen.
Here. Okay, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Madam Clerk, please read the explanatory note regarding hearings and comments.
Please be advised that council meetings are broadcast live on Comcast Channel 36 and Verizon Channel 30 and rebroadcast on Thursdays and Saturdays on HTTV on Comcast 36 and Verizon 33. When invited to speak, please come to the lectern, clearly state your name and address, spell your last name, and speak into the podium microphone so that your comments can be understood by all and properly recorded. Whenever an audience or council member reads from a prepared statement, please give or email a copy to the city clerk's office at cityclerk@cityofsummit.org. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard, speakers shall limit their comments to 3 minutes. Unless you are using an electronic device to follow the meeting agenda or need it for professional emergency contact purposes, please turn it off. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so before we open the hearing, I would like Mayor Fagan to make a couple comments.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight. Your engagement on this topic is greatly appreciated. It's super important, so I'm really glad that you're here. I'm proud to be a part of this ongoing process. As I mentioned at the debate last September, an overlay zone is necessary to prepare these properties for sale. Interestingly, Mr. Naidu also mentioned that these properties must be sold during that same debate. For the past few years, the community has been discussing these properties, often asking, what are they worth, and expressing desires to achieve the highest and best use for them. To address these concerns, I put our planning professionals, our city planner, planning board attorney, and city administrator to the task. The proposed overlay zone is the result of their collaboration and diligent work. Tonight is the culmination of years of community feedback. We systematically exited the city from redevelopment by ending our relationship with the developers and removing the area in need of redevelopment designation. Now, we're focused on fulfilling our promise to the community, selling these properties through an open, transparent, and public bid process. This approach will enable us to achieve multiple goals. We'll receive immediate revenue, which will help defray some of the costs associated with the new firehouse. We'll generate ongoing revenue through ratables. We'll encourage development of affordable housing units and enhance our downtown area with open space. We're also encouraging development that aligns with the character and scale of our town. The overlay zone makes good planning sense per our professional planner. It maintains Summit's unique character and is consistent with our master plan, balancing the community's desires with existing precedents. I want to thank Tom Behrens and Joe Burgess for their excellent work. Tom worked diligently to create the overlay zone and gave an excellent presentation at its introduction. And Joe did a great job presenting it to the planning board. So thank you, gentlemen. Our planning board chair, who has served on the planning board and in various planning capacities in town for about 10 years, remarked that the board has been looking at this piece of land for years, and this overlay will allow us to get the best value out of the property. The planning board unanimously agreed that the overlay zone is not inconsistent, which, as my third grade English teacher taught me, double negatives means that it is consistent with our master plan. Establishing this overlay zone provides a framework for the future development of the site. It includes a public process with the introduction of the ordinance, which we've had, the planning board consistency review, this public hearing, and an appraisal of the property. The bid process will also be public, and any developer will need to go through a public review process with the planning or zoning board. I look forward to seeing the innovative proposals from our developers once we put these properties up for sale. I'm really looking forward to the process and to hearing the community feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I am going to open the
I'm going to have Madam Clerk read the ordinance for hearing, but I just want to say, on the heels of the mayor, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. This is a very passionate topic, and so I know that it's an important night, a culmination of a couple years sitting in this room tonight. So I just want to thank you for coming and being present. And Madam Clerk, please read the ordinance for hearing.
Ordinance number 24-3319, an ordinance of the City of Summit, County of Union, New Jersey, amending Chapter 35 Development Regulations by creating a new Morris Broad Crossroads Overlay Zone District.
Councilwoman Hamlet?
Thank you, Councilwoman Allen. At this time, I would like to introduce ordinance number 24-3319. But before I do that, Rosie, should I mention the Scrivener errors right now, or should we do that later?
I don't think it's necessary.
Two small Scrivener's
Mr.
errors we
Jacoby,
found
in the
today.
planning board's resolution, there was an error on the reference to the date of the planning board meeting.
So
It's a Scrivener's error.
It has no impact whatsoever.
Yeah.
okay, and the ordinance number is incorrect, so we'll have to up, so there's two Scrivener's errors.
Scrivener errors, they can be corrected. and
Yeah.
that would be fine.
Okay, great. There was emails going back and forth all day, so I just want to make sure we're all set. Thank you, Council President. This is ordinance number 24-3319. I'd like to take an opportunity to introduce this ordinance for hearing. This is ordinance of the City of Summit, as the clerk just mentioned, City of Summit, County of Union, New Jersey, amending Chapter 35, Development Regulations by creating a new Morris Broad Crossroads Overlay Zone District. The purpose of this ordinance is to create overlay zoning framework as a development alternative to the underlying B Business Zone designation to remain for Block 2706, Lots 1, 2, 3, and 4, which include the city's firehouse site, Cedar Street office building, and Chestnut parking lot, in order to address a portion of the city's affordable housing obligation and, pursuant to the policy recommendations set forth in the city's master plan, accommodate several public purposes, including, but not limited to, the provision of residential development with a mandatory affordable housing set-aside, public parking adjacent to public uses and the downtown, usable open space, and accessibility for St. Teresa's Memorial Hall, a local historic landmark. The overlay zone is envisioned to be developed as a single, comprehensive, integrated site design. Whereas the City of Summit owns those parcels identified as Blocks 2706, Lots 1, 3, and 4 in the city tax records, which parcels include the city's Chestnut parking lot, former firehouse site, or soon to be, and Cedar Street office building respectively. And whereas the city anticipates the fire department will relocate to its newly constructed firehouse in the summer of 2024, rendering the existing firehouse site, Lot 3, vacant, which the city had planned to be developed for a new use. And whereas the city has determined the subject parcels to be underutilized in their current conditions, given their proximity to the Summit downtown, train station, and public amenities, and the imminent relocation of the fire department to its new firehouse. And whereas the city envisions the mixed use or residential development of tract in a manner that complements surrounding land uses, is consistent with the character of Summit's historic downtown, and intends to utilize this development opportunity to address a portion of its affordable housing obligations on this site through the provision of residential development with a mandatory affordable housing set-aside. And whereas the city also intends to accommodate several other public purposes on that site, but not limited to the provision of usable open green space, public parking adjacent to public uses and the downtown, and accessibility to St. Teresa's Memorial Hall, all of which are in accordance with the policies and objectives set forth in the City of Summit Master Plan. And whereas, in light of the above, the mayor and common council have determined it to be in the public interest to create a development program for the site which allows for the alternatives to the existing business zoning in pursuit of the aforementioned properties, while also realizing market realities. I would like an opportunity to introduce this for hearing.
Second.
Excellent, thank you. So the hearing is now open. Before I kick it off to public comment and to council comments, I'm going to first have Mr. Burgess speak to the overall process and explain the overlay ordinance. Mr. Burgess.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Good evening, everyone. I actually want to talk about two specific things here. One is the ordinance itself, but also the obligatory consistency review.
Yep. Yep. can we turn up Mr. Burgess's mic in the back room and maybe just pull it nice and close? And
Yes.
actually, oh, there you go.
Is that better?
Oh, wow, yes.
Very good.
Thank you.
Even I heard that.
Back room.
As I started to say, there's two issues that I want to address this evening. One is the ordinance itself, and I'm going to explain some of the more significant regulatory controls that are built into the ordinance and how they came to be. But I also need to talk about the Planning Board's consistency review. The statute, the municipal land use law, does in fact require the governing body to have reviewed that document and make a determination as to whether they accept it in whole or in part or not at all. And we'll talk about each of those things in turn. As had been indicated by the mayor, we always talk about a consistency review, but the statute in fact talks about an inconsistency review, that the governing body has to make, the planning board has to make an initial determination as to whether or not the draft ordinance is inconsistent or not with the goals and objectives of the master plan. We had prepared a memorandum dated May 24th of this year that provides that statutory overview. It assesses the proposed ordinance's consistency with the master plan. And with respect to that, I think the Common Council had referred it to the Planning Board on May 21st of this year.
22nd.
Or 22nd.
Excuse me, 22nd. The ordinance is designed to establish a new Morris Broad Crossroads overlay zone for lots 1 through 4 in block 2706. That probably doesn't mean much to anybody in the room, but basically it's the property consisting of 4 lots encompassing a total of 1.6 acres that fronts on Broad Street, Cedar Street, and Morris Avenue. 3 of the 4 parcels are in fact owned by the city. They include Lot 1, which is the Chestnut Street parking lot. That is at 406 Broad Street. Lot 3, which is the firehouse property that Delia had mentioned, at 384 to 392 Broad Street. And then Lot 4, which is a 2-story office building at present at 7 Cedar Street. In addition to those 3 lots, there is Lot 2 at 402 Broad Street, which is privately owned, and it's basically a 20-foot driveway strip bisecting the other 3 properties. What I want to talk about is the purpose of the ordinance, the use provisions, and some of the more pertinent regulatory controls. I think Delia had already pretty much indicated what the purpose of the ordinance is. It's to create a zoning overlay as a development alternative to the underlying B business zone. That underlying B business zone has very, very limited regulatory controls attached to it. It doesn't have minimum lot area requirement. It doesn't have any front, side, or rear yard setback requirements, and it's missing a number of other provisions. In fact, there's only 3 regulatory controls in the area and bulk requirements that it does in fact include. As had been mentioned, this ordinance is also designed not only to clean up the ordinance provisions, but also to provide for a portion of some affordable housing on the site. And it is also finally designed to address some of the very specific goals and objectives of the municipality's master plan. And those goals include, for example, encouraging inclusionary multifamily housing development, providing some public parking spaces, encouraging usable open space development on the site, and ensuring accessibility to the St. Teresa's Memorial Hall. And all of that is supposed to be done within the context of a single comprehensive integrated design encompassing all 4 of the lots that I had mentioned. Now, the ordinance itself identifies a number of permitted uses for the overlay zone. It includes multifamily residential development. It includes mixed-use residential development with at-grade retail with apartments above. It does limit the types of accessory uses associated with some of the development. For example, for the retail development, You're not allowed to have drive-through facilities, for example, or detached garages and sheds and the like. In addition to the mixed-use development, the ordinance also permits certain types of office uses, and it also permits townhouses, including stacked townhouse development. The regulatory controls are many, just to name a few of them. For the first time, there will be a minimum lot area requirement attached to this property. As I said earlier, the underlying business did not have any minimum area requirement. This ordinance requires a minimum of 1.5 acres to accommodate development. That number was specifically selected to ensure that the site would effectively be developed as a single comprehensive integrated design. The ordinance also has what's called a floor area ratio requirement. Floor area ratio is a ratio of floor space to total lot size. As an example, if you have a 40,000 square foot lot and the FAR is 25%, you would be entitled to have 10,000 square feet of office space, floor space, excuse me. In this particular instance, we permit up to 115% FAR, and that's a bonus of about 40% over the current FAR that is allowed in the business zone, and that is designed to encourage multifamily residential development in contrast to some of the other uses on the site. We have something unique in an ordinance. We have both a minimum and a maximum permitted density. The minimum density is 19 units to the acre, whereas the maximum density is 30 units to the acre. We do mandate that even if you were to do the minimum density, you still have to provide a certain level or number of affordable housing units on the site. The minimum set-aside requirements are 15% of the units have to be affordable if they are rental units, and a 20% set-aside if they are going to be for sale units. We have imposed what's, I believe, something new for the municipality, a maximum building length of 180 linear feet, and that is designed to ensure that there's a certain rational nexus between the established development pattern in the community and what could happen on this particular property. We have a mandate that minimally 9,000 square feet of the site has to be developed as a interconnected open space feature for the site. And one of the regulatory controls also requires that as part of the review process, once a developer is selected, they must initially come before the what's called a technical review committee review process, so we can evaluate the application relative to all these regulatory controls that I've mentioned. There are many, many others to ensure that the project will be consistent with the thrust of what this ordinance is all about. If the city does in fact adopt this ordinance, you may then proceed with requests for proposals from private developers to purchase the tract and develop it pursuant to the overlay zone ordinance. And as part of the bid process, any agreement between the city and the developer can include additional items over and above what's in this ordinance to ensure that the project and the process remains current and up to date. And finally, with respect to the master plan consistency review that the planning board has prepared, the municipal land use law does in fact provide that within 35 days of the introduction of any ordinance, the governing body is obligated to formally send that over to the planning board for their review to make that determination. The planning board did its review at their meeting at the end of May, and they determined that basically this ordinance is substantially consistent with the master plan, and that is based on a number of specific features in the master plan. For example, they referenced the master plan's concern with encouraging compatible architectural scale, balancing between commercial and residential development and providing landscape features and buffers on the site. The intent in the master plan to enhance the economic and social interests that will serve to improve the overall quality of life in the community, encourage residential development at densities which are compatible with existing development patterns in the municipality. Fourth, to strengthen the tax base through encouraging private investment on this site. And finally, to promote mixed-use development and residential development and promote a variety of housing types in the municipality. Now, the municipal land use law does in fact provide that the governing body can accept or disapprove the planning board's recommendation. If you disagree with it, your voting process is a little different, and it's a full voting, a majority of the full voting membership of the governing body, no matter how many people show up for any given evening. If you accept their recommendation, we can then just move on and hear from the public this evening. The bottom line conclusion to all this, and what the planning board recognized, is that after reviewing the various documents, the master plans and the reexamination reports against this ordinance, there are several policy themes that are clearly being affirmed. For example, promoting land use compatibility, which is with this established character of the community, was one issue that the planning board focused upon. Providing housing diversity consistent with existing established densities in the community was a second component. Providing sufficient parking and public parking on site was also a critical issue. In addition to that, facilitating reinvestment at this location was an important concern. And then finally, encouraging affordable housing development within the context of an inclusionary development design, and ensuring that the tract developed within the context of a single, comprehensive, integrated whole, were all components that the planning board felt seemed to indicate that this is consistent with the municipality's master plan. Now, based on all that, I think it's safe to conclude, from my perspective and the planning board's, that you can proceed to determine that the ordinance is in fact consistent with the master plan. Now, that provides a general overview. The next steps for you to consider tonight is that you would open the meeting to the public and listen to their comments. We have Sean from Iowa. Yeah, I know you're not Sean, you're Tom. He's only been with me for about 8 years.
It's like when we call our children different names, right?
Yeah, I blurred out all 3 names,
Yep.
and hopefully I'll get one right when I
Yeah.
talk to my kids. Tom and I, along with Nancy Holmes, will be writing down whatever questions and comments might come up. And then after you close the public portion, you will then be reviewing each and every one of those comments and questions before you make your final determination as to where you want to go with this ordinance. So with that, I would suggest you follow that procedure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burgess. Okay. So just to reiterate that, I'm actually going to just see if the council has any quick comments, some brief comments before we go to the public. And once we do go to the public, then we will just hear everyone's comments, close the public hearing, and then answer comments, as Mr. Burgess said, and following that. So do we have council comments before we go?
Council President, I'll wait until the end.
Perfect, okay.
I just
I
want
know,
to
I'm
say,
anxious to hear
when
it.
people come up and talk, if they can give their address. I know a lot of people are associated or affiliated with some sort of organization, but they may live out of town. If they could just say that, that would be great, just because this is such a, it's a big deal, right? And we want anyone watching at home to know if the resident lives in Summit or if they're with an organization. I think that's appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. All right. Does anyone else want to say anything before we kick it to, we are going to be able to come back to council too, so just so you know, we will have another opportunity. Okay, do you guys want to go to the public? Okay, wonderful.
Council President, would you please instruct everyone to speak directly into the microphone. If they move, it won't pick it up.
Okay.
Council President, I just have a quick question.
Yes.
Were you going to have Nancy Holmes speak now or after the public? I wasn't sure were you going to have her discuss anything?
No, I think, go ahead.
No, Joe addressed everything that.
Oh, perfect.
We coordinated.
Great. I have just one quick comment. I would say I didn't write anything down for the intro because everybody's been hearing me talk about this overlay zone for the last, I think, 2 months. And I found myself today thinking, why did I not write anything down? So I came up here tonight at 7 o'clock and I parked my car on Broad Street. And I went right in front of the firehouse because we've all been talking about this area for so many years and it's so important. So I sat there for just 15 minutes and I thought about all of the conversations we've had about this property and all the residents who are impacted. So when you're here tonight, just know that we have not taken this lightly. It's taken a lot of time and effort, and I think I've created 4,000 binders for tonight with so much detail. And Joe, thank you for talking to me a ton of times today, as well as Tom, and going through very specifics and nuances of this overlay zone. So thank you for your hard work. That's it.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And before we open, I just wanted to say the ground rules is that the room is full tonight. So I ask that only one person has the floor at a time. Please do not have any back conversations in the back of the room while someone is speaking at the lectern. I can't hear you in the back of the room, so it's hard to manage conversations if you're speaking. So only one person at a time. No booing. We are neighbors. I love this community, and all of us have raised our families here. When we see each other at Acme or Little Kings, I want to know that we're able to have a productive conversation, listen to each other, and know that we truly appreciate the diversity of opinions in our city. So with that, I'm going to open public comment for the first person. Come on up. And if you could just say your name and your home address and speak into the mic and try not to move too much.
Most definitely. Thank you, Madam President. My name is Rick Hanley. I have been a resident of Summit for 24 years. I currently reside at 36 Plymouth Road. The first thing I'd like to say is for all of you up front who are elected officials, as well as all of you who are appointed to your various committees and serve the community and this fine city, I'd like to thank you for your service. My family and I benefit greatly from your efforts, so thank you. With regards to the current proposal, I first want to say that I'm happy that old proposals have been put to the wayside and that feedback from the community has been taken and is again important to tonight's conversation. Regarding the current proposal, I would like to say that given the expense of the new firehouse, the city really needs to get the highest value, in my view, for these properties, and selling them in a competitive auction to the highest bidder, I believe, is the way to go. So for that, I certainly think that I'm very supportive of this, and I like to think that council will support this and vote for this ordinance. So that's the extent of my comments, and thank you very much again for your service and your consideration of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Hold on 1 second, we'll get the timer going. And everybody has 3 minutes, so when the timer dings, we'll ask you to stop, so.
I assure you I will not
Oh,
take
no,
3
no
minutes.
worries. I just forgot to say it.
I'm William Conley, and I'm the attorney for the Summit Housing Authority. I'll start off by saying we're not here in any way in opposition to this ordinance. It seems like a great idea.
Wait,
Can you
hold
hear
on
me?
1 second. Can you stop that?
I don't have an address.
Oh,
I represent the Summit Housing.
yeah, I'm sorry. Everyone, please. No speaking while someone's already at the lectern.
So I'll continue, if I may.
Yes.
The Summit Housing Authority has not asked me to appear in any way in opposition. In fact, they think this is a great idea. And they applaud the efforts that have been made by the council and the planning board. Just a few questions, however. The set-aside, the housing and set-aside for affordable housing is set for 15% rental units and 20% non-rental units. And I would just like to ask, because we don't know the answer, but like maybe your planner can help us out. Why was it determined to be 15% as opposed to a larger percent of rental units? Of course, our experience has been with low-income housing that rental units are probably more preferable, more affordable for those kinds of people. So that's the first question. The second question is, I know that you have an RAH1 zone, which is an affordable housing zone. Has that been maxed out in terms of the number of units, affordable housing units put in that zone? That's just a matter of information we're looking for also. And that's my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Wait, hold on 1 second. Wait till we're good. Okay, name and home address.
Yes, Mayor Fagan, President Allen, members of the council. My name is Wim Sweldens. That's Swelldens. I live on 1 Euclid Avenue, apartment 5F, right here in town. And I first moved to Summit in 1995, and I've been a member of the larger community for almost 30 years. I am here to speak on my own behalf. I mean, I am a member of the Unitarian Beacon congregation in town. I'm also a member of the Warm Hearts volunteer program that manages and helps the unhoused people in our town. Professionally, I am a tech entrepreneur and innovator, and I want to make clear that I'm here to argue in favor of affordable housing, but not on my own behalf. But in a way, I am here on my own behalf. I am here on behalf of many of my friends in town. And I'd like to think I'm here on behalf of all of us. I like this room a lot. It is very special to me. I was married in this room 30 years ago by the then mayor of Summit. In this room, we all make the decisions that determine the community we live in. I like to believe we make those decisions based on the values that we have as a community, that several of the speakers have already mentioned. We like to live in a community driven by safety, driven by responsibility, driven by civil conduct. But we also like to live in a community that has values of compassion and values of diversity and inclusion. I'm speaking on behalf of some of my friends. Some of them are unhoused and would like to have a roof over their head. I've gotten to know many of them on a first-name basis. And I'll admit, before volunteering, I was the one who walked in a wide circle around them. I have other friends here. Many of them are your waiters or your dog walkers. They are worried they can no longer afford to live in this town. I would like them to stay, and I think you would like them to stay. Some of them are retired, ride their bike around town every day like I do. I would like them to stay. I think we all benefit if they would stay. I ask each of you in this proposal to vote your conscience and to not necessarily look at only the economic impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person.
Blake Scalette. I live at 105 New England Avenue. I'm also the pastor of St. John's Lutheran Church at 587 Springfield Avenue, both here in Summit. I want to begin with just a personal comment that, quite frankly, I am frustrated, I'm disappointed, and I'm feeling a little bit deceived. I've stood in this space and in other meetings, in listening sessions, and one-off conversations with this council and its predecessors for the 12 years that I have lived and served in this community. Only a few weeks ago, or I guess it was a couple months ago, Councilor Allen, I stood here after you said 3 times, I support affordable housing. And I was so glad to hear that. However, this plan seems to so minimize that desperate need in our community. At best, this 15 to 20%, given all the other limitations, is only going to put in a very few actual units. It's really sad. However, I'm a pastor, and I believe in repentance and second chances and grace. And so I'm going to hope that you all hear that call to turn back your foolish ways and try again. I want to begin by reading a letter that my colleague will follow from the whole Interfaith Council. We, the members of the Summit Interfaith Council, write to voice our concern about the lack of action to address the need of affordable, sustainable, and accessible housing in Summit. We are disappointed in your decision to sell the old firehouse property, along with 2 other properties, rather than pursuing concrete action for housing. Across our faith communities, we know that there is a desperate and growing need for housing in Summit. Increasingly, families are being destabilized and pushed out of their homes. With the recent sale of several properties that provided more affordable rent and their subsequent renovations and redevelopment, we are losing longtime residents. This doesn't even account for the essential workers who can no longer live here. We are facing an increasingly elite and segregated community. We are disturbed by the incongruence between your public declarations in support of affordable housing and your proposed actions to sell one of the last available properties for affordable housing to the highest bidder after rejecting a nonpartisan community-created solution. To date, our community still does not have a concrete plan for creating affordable housing. As you are aware, the 10-year 2015 to 2025 Summit Fair Share Housing Court Settlement mandate is for 50 units of affordable housing. This number of units is far fewer than the number of affordable units Summit should have added to the housing stock within this time. However, the city is on track to fall woefully short of this mandate, less than 50% of the required units. In recent comments, you pledged that you will meet this mandate. Will you meet the mandate with new housing units?
Thank you.
Pastor, may I have your statement?
Yeah.
She will deliver it to you.
Oh, thank you.
Because it will go in with all the notes. Okay.
She has the nice little letterhead.
Hold on one second.
Good evening, council members. I will complete the letter in a moment. I'm Reverend Dr. Robin Tanner, president of the Summit Interfaith Council, also a member of the lead ministry team at Beacon Unitarian Universalist Congregation. I do not live in Summit because 8 years ago when my wife and I moved to New Jersey from North Carolina, we were unable to find a home that we could afford here. So I pick up where Pastor Blake left off. Will we meet the mandate with new housing units that make good on your commitment to affordable housing in our city? Or do you plan to meet the mandate with reclassification of existing housing? Soon, the City of Summit will be under new requirements by state law to create more affordable housing. If you sell this property, then how do you plan to meet any new requirements? The past few decades have shown us that inclusion of affordable housing into larger development is an impractical method that further increases development while abandoning the need for affordable housing. If this last remaining property is sold and gone, then will you falsely plead with the courts that there is simply no land in Summit to build housing? If you pursue this action now, what litigation and other costs will be levied against the residents of Summit? We know there are budget demands, but we write with not only a social and economic demand, but also a moral one. Will you make good on your promises to create a fair, equitable, and accessible community, or will you sell to the highest bidder? We come with a call to love thy neighbor. We believe that such a moral promise requires faithful leaders willing to move past political expediency and popularity. We remain willing to partner with you in that endeavor, as do the gathering of nonpartisan residents who proposed the recent affordable housing project. We understand that affordable housing can be a difficult pursuit. Sacrifices will be required from Summit to do what is needful. The hardworking people who serve our city every day deserve to be able to afford to live in this community. We urge you to reconsider. Do what is right. Be courageous leaders who help to build a better community for all people. A copy of this open letter will be sent to the court overseeing Summit's Fair Share Housing Settlement. Sincerely, the Summit Interfaith Council.
Reverend Tanner, can you give us the city of address where you live? I know.
West Orange. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've had
That's okay. No,
harassment,
no, I know.
and so unfortunately.
It's- it's-
Good evening.
Oh, wait, hold on one second, Jean. Once you have your full time. Okay. Hold on. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Jean Crichton. I live at 173 Summit Avenue in Summit, and I'm a member of At Home in Summit, which wanted to build a 42-unit, 4-story apartment house for affordable housing. I'm very troubled by the proposal to sell the firehouse and 7th Cedar Street properties immediately. Common Council should act prudently and hold these properties off the market until the city has evaluated and planned for its Round 4 10-year affordable housing obligation, which will begin a year from now. Under revisions to New Jersey's Fair Housing Act, the city will soon be required to develop a new fair share affordable housing plan, which will be incorporated into the city's master plan. The firehouse and Cedar Street properties are essential to a sound, doable fair share plan. The city's affordable housing attorneys forecast a Round 4 obligation of building 80 to 100 new affordable units. The city should wait until the fair share plan is developed before selling the property. And I just want to, there's a kind of amnesia about who could live in these affordable units. These are people, like they were saying just now, people who work in town, people, policemen, teachers, people who would like to be here, and seniors.
Please, no time.
I'm sorry.
Jean, I'm sorry, hold on one second. I'm asking, it's still early. Please do not break the rules. We do not speak over each other. Jean, please proceed.
Right. Also seniors who have downsized and would still like to stay in Summit but don't have enough money. It will be the responsibility of Common Council to see that these 90 or so affordable units are constructed in Round 4. If the city's new fair share plan does not provide for these units, the city will be subject to litigation, and a court order requiring it to rezone our town could be 600 or more market rate units can be built if we continue to use only the set-aside mechanism, because it just can't provide enough units. Is this really what council wants? I don't think anyone in Summit, excuse me, wants to see that kind of development. It's irresponsible for council to think it can simply ignore the law. Eventually, a court will order Summit to comply with its fair share obligation. In the process, Summit will incur attorney fees, litigation costs, and it will be subject to large-scale overdevelopment. Please vote no on the overlay plan.
Yes, for his statement. Jean, can we take your statement? Thank you. Okay, thank you. Hold on one second, just make sure this is working. Okay, we're good. All right. Name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Mike McTiernan. I'm at 11 Blackburn Road in Summit. I want to thank all you guys up here for all your hard work on all this. I know this has been a long, strenuous process. I was actually going to talk about the specific ordinance, but this seems to have morphed into an affordable housing conversation. And I get it. It's part of the thing, and it's what everyone wants to talk about here. It's difficult to sit in the audience, though, and continue to hear this term called mandate. There is no 50-unit mandate. I was on council when we negotiated the affordable housing agreement. It's a 50-unit best effort goal. So please, I wish the rhetoric would actually talk about it the way it's supposed to be talked about. The part of that agreement as well, Fair Share Housing and the courts determined that Summit is a built-out city. That's what they said. So that's just a fact. So when affordable housing development is, or when builders come in, the entire town has been an overlay zone for this 15 or 20%. So when any development happens in our town, there is an affordable housing set aside. developers could come in today and buy a block on Springfield Avenue and build affordable housing if they would like to. They don't because it's not economic. All these proposals are talking about affordability in Summit. You guys have a tough job because you have to balance affordability for everyone who lives here, which means paying property taxes. You guys just passed a budget where people were complaining about a 0.2% increase or 2% increase on their taxes. It's because everyone is feeling the pinch. And none of this is free. So when you decide you're going to subsidize affordable housing by just allowing a developer to do this and get $2 million for the lot, you're asking everyone else to chip in already a very expensive town. And people are always leaving because the taxes are high anyway. So you guys have a difficult job, and I applaud you for it. The best way to do this is to sell it at the market level. The set-asides are the way they are, and there will be affordable housing. And I applaud you for actually putting in a minimum amount of affordable housing. Again, I know you're not blind to this problem. Everybody sees it, but you have to balance the affordability for everyone, not just some people that may move into Summit. So I thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Mike, can we have your statement?
There wasn't a statement.
Okay. Okay.
I saw him, he didn't have paper.
Okay. Anyone else would like to come up and speak? And then you.
Jacqueline LaSaracina. I live at 105 Witchford Road here in Summit. I'm here in support of the At Home in Summit proposal. This may be a controversial point in this room. I don't think government is the answer to every problem. I don't. That's part of what I love about the At Home proposal. It was community members coming together, investing their time to come up with a beautiful proposal for homes for 42 working families and individuals. Community members doing their part so Summit can do its part. At last month's City Council meeting, 2 arguments were presented in opposition to the At Home proposal. One, that the city does not desire to reopen the Fair Share Settlement Agreement, and 2, that the city has a preference for inclusionary housing. I will address each of those in turn, time permitting. On the first argument, against reopening the settlement agreement, yes, reopening the settlement agreement will take time and resources, for sure. Perhaps there's fear that if we approach Fair Share with the settlement agreement reopening, they would try to exact more from the city beyond the 42 units that have been proposed. And I understand that even asking the question of Fair Share may poke the bear, upset the apple cart. I know this argument well. I used this argument when I practiced as an attorney for 15 years. In this case, in my view, it does not hold water. Fair Share's mission is to promote affordable housing. They have only 3 staff attorneys to do this important work all across the state. It seems probable Fair Share will welcome this 42-unit proposal because it brings the city into full compliance with our current settlement agreement. But we don't know for sure because we haven't asked the question. Now, I don't know about you, but when I have to make difficult decisions, I don't like to decide from a place of fear and lack of information. On the inclusionary housing point, if city leadership is aware of research that suggests inclusionary housing is better or beneficial for working families in their communities as opposed to dedicated affordable housing, I ask that you kindly share it. In the absence of that information, we ask the experts, right? Here that means working families and individuals. Through my pro bono legal work and volunteer activities, I've talked to hundreds of working families. When they talk about their hopes and worries, they talk about wanting a place where their kids can do their homework, that their family can be proud of. Never once in any of these conversations have they talked about a preference for mixed unit housing. I will wrap up as my emotions are getting the better of me, but I'll finish where I started. Government alone is not the answer, but we we do need the city council to give the at-home plan a real shot. Beyond
Thank you.
all this talk,
Yeah.
what gets done reveals our true values, and I hope we
you.
will do what is right here. Thank you.
Do you have a statement?
Good evening. I'm Jay Brinkerhoff. I live at 12 Westminster Road.
Jay, just bring the microphone a little closer.
I'm here to speak in favor of the ordinance that's in front of you.
Speak into the microphone.
Louder. I know.
It balances, in my opinion, a number of conflicting, and often conflicting is the word I think about when I think about real estate development and urban development. As some of you may know, I was a member of the planning board for about 12 years and vice chair for about half of those. So have lived with and tried to deal with some of these challenges. I think this proposal that you have in front of you does an excellent job of balancing the alternative needs we have. I'm not going to try and I will not try and take anyone's time reiterating. I think Joe Burgess did a wonderful job outlining them. Council member Hamlet also did that. There's no need for me to lay out what those are. I would add this, however. I've known Joe Burgess for 15 years and worked with him. I think he's probably the premier urban planner, the premier expert in the state when it comes to issues like this. I worked with Tom for a couple of years when we rewrote the DRO. We have the benefit of their expertise. Take advantage of it, please. They're wise. They understand our community because they've worked with us for many, many years. And their recommendation is clear, and it addresses many of the goals and ambitions of the master plan. I know that's been a reference point for many years. As a member of the planning board in 2016, I and other planning board members helped write that. They know it well. And this addresses those wisely and succinctly. I'd ask you to please move ahead with this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Hold on one second. Okay, name and address, please.
Good evening, John Griffith, Bedell Avenue. So I wanted to just make some comments about the ordinance quickly, but before I did that, President Allen, I wanted to compliment you on your very pleasant demeanor, and I also wanted to compliment the entire council on your collegial interaction, as far as we can tell here. But with respect to the ordinance, I'm strongly in favor of passing it, and it's for two simple reasons. One is it maximizes value for the property, which I think we desperately need in this town right now. And number two, as the gentleman who was just speaking said, it accomplishes our goals related to the master plan, which I think most people are in agreement that those are important and lofty goals that were set out for a reason. So that's why I support the ordinance. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Wait, hold on one second, Andrew. We all set? Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Andrew Walker. I reside at 242 Kent Place Boulevard. And I'd like to address the ways this proposed overlay zone conflicts with the master plan. So we've heard that it's consistent, but there are some things that are at odds with the master plan. Specifically, it conflicts with the city's fair share plan, which is an element of the master plan. I know the planning board voted on May 28th to approve this proposed overlay ordinance as consistent with the master plan. But the city zoning attorney did not allow the public to speak at that time. So I'd like to make the points that actually should have been made first before that vote. Summit's fair share plan, approved by this council and the planning board in 2018, incorporates word for word the terms of the city's 2016 settlement agreement with the Fair Share Housing Center. This agreement was entered as an order by the New Jersey Superior Court, obligates the city to take, and I quote, all reasonable steps, not best efforts, needed to achieve the goal of facilitating the construction of 50 new rental or ownership affordable housing units in 100% scattered site affordable developments by June 2025.
The Fair Share Plan element of the master plan explicitly states that the plan sets forth the manner in which the City of Summit addresses its constitutional obligation, that's a word in the plan, to provide for affordable housing. So this plan, the ordinance is not consistent with the plan. Additionally, 2016 revisions to the master plan explicitly validated the goal, stating the city should continue to move aggressively forward with implementing the Fair Share Plan. With a year remaining under the settlement agreement, only 16 affordable units have been built since 2016. There are another 7 in the pipeline, but this will bring the total number of affordable units in round 3 to 23. That is, we've heard already, less than half of our goal. That's 27 short of the number called for in Summit's master plan. The city has no plans to deliver the 27 units in the coming year, and it is out of compliance with both the master plan and the settlement agreement with Fair Share. As others have said, and I've said before you previously, inclusionary affordable set-asides in market rate developments will never generate anywhere near the number of affordable units needed in Summit. It's a short-change compromise. The creation of this overlay zone and the imminent sale of the properties will make it impossible for the city to meet its 50-unit goal. And as is stated in the master plan, its constitutional obligation to provide for affordable housing. There's no other land to build on. So I'll wrap it up and just say, I urge you to vote no on the overlay zone ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
I do have a longer statement that I'm presenting in writing for inclusion.
Is that okay?
If this is not the version that you're giving me, I should only have the version that you were reading from.
I thought people previously submitted things for the record.
No,
No.
only what,
During
the
COVID.
statement that they read. Maybe they didn't finish it, but it was the only statement they read.
Yeah. Yeah, it's okay. I mean, you can always send us a follow-up email so that we have it.
I'll do
Yeah,
that.
and we can certainly circulate it amongst the council. But this is for the public records.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay.
Good evening. I'm Claire Toth, T-O-T-H, at 11 Sunset Drive. This ordinance was introduced 3 weeks ago and will likely be finalized tonight. That is way too fast a timetable. Oh, what is that? This council began this year promising transparency. It promised task forces on important matters. It promised public fora. None of that has occurred with this ordinance before tonight, which will significantly reshape the greater downtown. In many ways, this overlay zone resembles the prior redevelopment plan, except the city has far less control over what is built, lacks the financial tools to capture the bulk of recurring revenue, and has permitted zero community input in the process of creating the ordinance. Further, there's been no explanation as to why this path is the right one. For all of its many faults, the Broad Street West project included significant community outreach and input before the pandemic. Residents discussed topics such as building design and appearance, sustainability, and a wide variety of land use possibilities. None of that has occurred here. Residents who opposed the Broad Street West proposal demanded that anything built there comply with the existing zoning regulations. By introducing this overlay zone, council is ignoring that concern and in fact is doing just the opposite. It will permit a building of 4 stories instead of 3 and will allow for 50% more density than is currently permitted under the DRO. Council should take a breath. Table the ordinance this evening. Hold multiple community meetings and actively seek input from residents. Use that input to rework the proposal and make it right. Thank you.
Allison Chifo, 34 Laurel Avenue in Summit. I support this ordinance. I do not have a law degree, disclosure, but what I do have is common sense. The previous council approved a very large, over-budgeted firehouse to be built. We have that firehouse, the current firehouse is going to be moved. Fire department's going to be moved to the new firehouse, and we will have an empty piece of land, which are all these different lots that need to be utilized. And the city is not going to should not be sitting around with empty lots without doing something for them to help benefit the city. So I support this ordinance because I think this is what needs to be done. It's common sense. And for all the groups, the at-home group that wants to have this, have a full affordable housing unit built there, they can also put in bids for themselves, put in a bid, purchase the land, and build 100% affordable housing. So that's just common sense. Thank you.
Hi, Elliot Fishman, 34 Webster Avenue, Summit, New Jersey. I reluctantly got involved in community activism a few years ago when a developer, an outside developer, was trying to build a large daycare center overwhelming a neighborhood. And then I got roped into being co-chair of that committee, which kind of grew and grew and grew, and I got to know all my neighbors for many blocks around. Ultimately, it was 200 households, 400 community members. So I got to know my neighbors. And I think I got to know the silent majority in this town, people who typically do not come to council meetings. But they did come to that planning board meeting. And I think we had a record number of people on the planning board. There was something close to 200 people on the call at the final vote. And the planning board did the right thing. They voted that the developer's proposal down. So I've become acquainted with the planning process, the DRO, the master plan. I've been acquainted with hundreds of my neighbors who are not the type to show up at council meetings, but do care about their community, they do care about zoning, and they do care about their taxes. I believe they are the silent majority who voted you in. Subsequently, I was not a leader, but I was a participant in the Broad Street West opposition movement. I applaud both current and former members of council for voting that down. Now I'm here to speak in enthusiastic support of the ordinance which you're putting on the table tonight. This is based on the aforementioned experiences and knowledge, and not only is it a thoughtful and prudent proposal, as Mr. Burgess said, but I believe it is fair and addresses the needs of all Summit residents. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Okay.
Vicki Letterman, 52 Clark Street.
Street address, sorry, what was the street address?
Street address. 52 Clark. Okay. So many thoughts in my head. First, I would like to correct that other woman. This has been repeatedly said that affordable housing is done by a lottery. Summit has no say in who will live there. It is not for Summit residents. It's not for police officers or teachers or anyone else. It's a lottery. Correct? Okay. Unfortunately, I think we'd all love to house the people who already live in Summit. Second, the previous council whiplashed, removed the area in need of redevelopment designation for this property. The Cedar Street lot was, in my understanding, I'm sure someone from the previous council can correct me if I'm wrong, was purchased in order to increase the value of the entire piece so it could be sold to pay for or help pay for the over-the-budget firehouse help lower our taxes or at least help with city costs. The previous council, majority Democrat, specifically set up this property to be sold for maximum value. That was their goal, and I support that. I'm a firm believer in affordable housing as well. I am not a firm believer. I think it is bad for people living in affordable housing to be segregated and isolated in a 100% building. They need to be integrated into the community, to be a part of the community, to be neighbors with other people. What I hear going on tonight is this black and white, one way or the other. Either it's this overlay zone, which I think makes total sense, or it's at home in Summit. Nothing else, nothing else. That's not true. There are other properties in town. They might be smaller, that can be developed. A portion goes to affordable housing. Real affordable housing, in my opinion, belongs on the Red Cross property. This is a perfect, beautiful piece of property in a family-friendly neighborhood next to a school, near transportation and a supermarket. This property here in a semi-commercial area is not safe for children to walk to school. There's no one else around for them to be neighbors with. It's not an either-or situation. We should be looking, and as everyone who supports these affordable housing laws knows, there are many ways the city can access and acquire the Red Cross property. Obviously, they support it. They support the laws. This is where we need to go.
Thank you. Okay. Go ahead, Diego.
Good evening. Diego Hoyk, 9 Argyle Court. You have a tough job to do. Like many in our community, I moved to Summit seeking less development than what I had when I lived in Jersey City. And this proposal does have the potential to deliver a building of the right size for Summit, even if the need for this ordinance demonstrates that the intended building does not comply with our current zoning laws. I do have a few simple questions for this council as it votes on this ordinance to solve the Broad Street West conundrum. Number one, is there a consensus amongst our elected leaders about how many affordable housing units Summit must add to fulfill our round 3 Mount Laurel obligation by 2025? Number two, some council members have claimed that we only need to show good faith progress towards the 50 units. Can you please make public the good faith plan to comply with the agreement? In other words, where, with whom, when will Summit build the units that it needs to fulfill round 3 by 2025? Number three, how can Summit convince a court that it is negotiating in good faith when some members of council continue to say the quiet part out loud? They do not think that the city needs to abide by the settlement and build the 50 affordable units. Number four, if the courts were to find Summit non-compliant, would they not throw away zoning limitations or a sales contract? Would it not be possible then for the developer to build a much larger building? Number five, relatedly, how do we ensure that the eventual buyer builds instead of sitting on the property, waiting for the courts to allow them to build a bigger building after finding us not compliant with our obligation? Number six, how does Summit ensure that the city does not lose any more public parking? Number seven, what feedback has the owner of the sliver of land that is non-city owned given on this initiative? And number eight, isn't the city debt today $6 million lower than after the firehouse was bonded? In my life, I have often found that it's better to go slow in order to go fast. If you were to make a mistake tonight, our community could pay for it for generations. Please think before you vote. This vote could be your legacy. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any further comments?
Yes. There was a lot of talk about compassion tonight.
Your name, please.
There were
Name
Vicki
and
Freeman,
address, yes.
46 Shadyside Avenue in Summit. I have 4 kids that I've raised here. My youngest is in the high school. And I just want to say, I came here to support the ordinance. I'm concerned about how much Summit spent on what my husband and I called the Tajma Firehouse. And I know that we need to sell the old firehouse property. I really encourage you to pass this ordinance, but I sort of wasn't expecting all the talk about the affordable housing. There was just a lot of talk of compassion and even tears tonight over this. And I just want to say, can you also please have some compassion to the hardworking people of New Jersey? And some of these guys that wake up at 4:30 in the morning and go get on a train, go into the city, get home at 9 o'clock at night, bust their asses. Everyone is working hard here. And people would like to be able to retire here. It's a wonderful place. They want to have their grandkids be here and their children to come back here. It's too expensive. Everyone I know, my youngest is now a sophomore, and people are leaving. 2 people in my neighborhood this year bought places in Nashville because it's more affordable to retire there. I would like to be able to retire here. And I want you to have compassion, please, for the people that work so hard, that pay the taxes. This is one of the highest tax states in the entire country. And I didn't expect to say any of this tonight, but I'm very frustrated with these comments tonight, and I hope you will ignore a lot of them. So, thank you. Not mine.
Hi, Francie Cho, 27 Beekman Terrace. I just want to say I was kind of taken aback by this whole proposal. I think it's gone way too fast. I only read it tonight, right before I came here, and the numbers are not working out. With the redevelopment zone, you guys were getting a lot more, the town, was getting a lot more money in taxes. We were going to get 95% in taxes, I think, instead of 30% you'll be getting going forward. I haven't seen any numbers that show what you expect to get it. I think the numbers were way better with the Broad Street West development. I also think, as I said before, when we had the Broad Street West proposal, that I think we have a legal and a moral obligation to provide more affordable housing. I'd like to echo everything that the Summit Interfaith Council said. So I strongly think that you should vote no. I think this has been rushed. One of the things that many people on this dais ran on was that they wanted more transparency. And you guys everybody was up in arms that they hated Broad Street West. If you look at the numbers, you were getting way more in taxes, and you're going to get the $8 million for the sale. I suspect that if you sell this property as you propose, you're going to get way less, and taxes will be the income will be much less because it's not a redevelopment zone, and you're not going to have any control over it once you've sold it. So I would encourage you to vote no. Thank you.
That one goes
Give me a
really
break.
high.
Thank you, Council President. Can everybody hear me now?
Name
Mayor and council members.
Danny, name and address.
Danny O'Sullivan, 33 Crescent Avenue. By passing this ordinance tonight, you will be ceding control of this property to the buyer. I know there are stipulations in the ordinance, but you can't control what the building will look like, the quality of the materials used, and the timeline of the build, among other things. We've seen some buildings languish in disrepair for years, specifically the Boston Consulting Group property at 466 Springfield Avenue and 1 DeForest Avenue. Having city oversight on the project is so important in helping us avoid situations like those two. This area that will be redeveloped was always bipartisan, and I hope we get back to the place where that is so. It would help tremendously if there was more community outreach regarding tonight's ordinance. I'm pretty tuned in to what's happening around town, and the only place I saw it was in the council agenda. One final thing, reading through the ordinance, I'm curious about the 7 parking spaces for St. Teresa's mentioned on page 2 of Appendix A. Why is the city doing this? Is there an agreement with the city to give those spaces to St. Teresa's? Are these possibly public spaces that are now going to be under St. Teresa's control? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Midget level. Hi, I'm Deborah Oliver, 37 Tulip Street, Summit. like Mr. McTiernan, like he wanted to do, I have some things I want to say to commend what you've proposed and to speak in favor of it. But I also want to digress onto affordable housing because it seems to be of the moment. First, I want to commend this council for taking this important first step towards private development, which is to say the improvement of these properties located at the crossroads of town, which have literally been in the public eye for development and discussion in this community for more than a decade. I don't know where some of you have been for the last 2 years, but there's been lots of community input about what to do with this property. So for people to say this is new, I haven't heard, I don't know. It's been all over town. Everybody knows about it. Secondly, I want to commend this council and Burgess Associates for creating zoning that truly strikes a balance between the competing needs of the site and our town generally. There are many interests to be balanced, not just affordable housing, but other public interests. And with this overlay, affordable housing must be provided. Public parking must be provided. Usable green space, which keeps our suburban feel, and a view shed along Broad Street towards St. Teresa Memorial Hall, a local historic landmark, must be provided, and more. But best of all, in my opinion, is that the zoning parameters, the guidelines that it sets for private development, have a hometown feel to them, a summit-sized and summit-scaled feel. The heights, the densities, the coverages, the setbacks, these will preserve the suburban town character of Summit. There's no Instant City or Broad Street West container ship getting dropped in from a spaceship that can be built with this overlay zoning, and I am thankful for that. I look forward to this ordinance being passed. So just a couple words on inclusionary housing. As a trained architect with experience in urban planning, I have been taught my entire career that inclusionary housing is the best type of urban design approach. Both our master plan and our settlement agreement specifically mention inclusionary housing and not 100% affordable housing. Yet, I take the point that this may become an issue. So what I suggest is that people put their creative caps on, and instead of insisting that this crossroads location is the only location, that other ideas be thought about. Thank you.
Thank you. Deborah, do you want to give us your statement?
I'll have to email it.
Okay, no worries. Okay. Are there any other public comments?
Hi, I'm the Reverend Julie Yarborough. I'm a pastor at Christ Church in Summit. I live in Chatham. I'm a member of the Summit Interfaith Council. Members of the Common Council have made arguments in opposition to the proposal from Summit Affordable Housing Corporation as a justification for proceeding with this ordinance that will completely eliminate that option. Let's go over several of these arguments. The proposed housing at 50 units per acre is too dense. Not true. If the Common Council is committed to creating affordable housing, it must recognize that such housing is built to a higher density for the specific reason that affordable housing and density simply go together. Multifamily housing, often denser than the surrounding housing, is at the core of the Mount Laurel housing rules that the Common Council is mandated to follow. In fact, any decision to exclude such housing on the basis of density is a direct violation of the Mount Laurel Doctrine, protected by the Constitution of the State of New Jersey. The affordable housing that has been proposed for the 0.8-acre firehouse site will comfortably accommodate the working families who will live there, and the building size and height will blend well with the surroundings. The rest of the Broad Street area should be zoned at 30 units per acre to achieve the optimal overall balance. Second argument, residents of the proposed housing for the firehouse site will feel isolated, and such housing is not sufficiently inclusionary. Ideally, all affordable units would be located in buildings with a mix of market rate and affordable units, but there is simply not enough land in Summit to achieve that result under any reasonable timetable. For the past 40 years, public policy has endorsed the location of affordable housing projects in communities using the exact approach that has been proposed for the firehouse site. The results have been excellent. Such projects, of which there are several hundred just in the New Jersey area alone, have shown superior financial results with virtually no defaults or foreclosures. Surveys of tenant satisfaction have been completed, and for projects located in affluent communities close to schools, jobs, and transit, the measured levels of tenant satisfaction have been very high. And lastly, Summit needs to make a profit from the Broad Street land for budgetary reasons. We must sell to the highest bidder proposing high-end luxury housing. There is no doubt that high-end luxury housing generates profits, and by contrast, affordable housing operates just above break-even. This is why the state and the New Jersey Supreme Court have ruled for the past 50 years that affordable housing is a beneficial use, not unlike a park, a college, or a public safety facility. It is not up to the private sector to provide such facilities. It is, however, the responsibility of the public sector. Summit could get more money selling this land to the highest bidder, but this does not mean it is sound public policy to do so. Further, the proposed firehouse site housing can be efficiently funded based on its location near quality schools, jobs, and transit by the state of New Jersey.
Thank you.
And the city of.
Thank you.
No, you can leave it in, as long as it's safe. Thank you.
Hold on one second, Amy. Hold on. Okay.
I'll be quick. I won't take the whole 3 minutes, I promise. It's getting late. First of all, I too want to echo the words of several people here. I want to thank Council and Councilwoman Hamlet for her hard work
Amy,
on this.
home address.
Oh, Amy DeCibia, 1 Essex Road. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. For your hard work on this. And I guess I just really want to say it's, I know there are a lot of passionate people here who have some ideas that I believe truly come from their hearts. But I think we should really listen to what the experts have had to say. We've heard from a former planning board member, or maybe chair, I'm not certain. The current one, I think Mayor Fagan quoted his or her comments, I'm not certain who that is. And we've heard from Burgess Associates. And I think the professionals, and frankly from Deb Oliver, who I've worked closely with a different project in town. But I think what the experts have to say is something that we should really listen to. They're considering the big picture. They're not just sort of driven by one agenda, and I don't mean to say that insulting to any of the people from At Home and Summit, but I really think we should listen to the professionals on this one, and so for that reason, I fully support this ordinance, and I hope you'll all pass it this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi. Name and address.
Stacy Allen,
Okay.
on Plymouth Road. Thank you all for everything you've done to make this ordinance come to the floor here. I just want to say that I've lived in Summit for 24 years. I chose Summit because of its aesthetic beauty. That is one of the main reasons I think we all like this town. I only got involved in community council meetings. I'm sorry to everybody before that, but I never came to council meetings until we had the threat of Broad Street West. I was shocked that our town would build something that was not in keeping with the size and scope of our downtown, and I felt very strongly against that project. So I think this new overlay zone is a nice compromise, is a good way to have what the town needs and keep with the look of the town and the character of the town. I think the value that all of us have in our homes, and even if we rent here, it's about what we enjoy in Summit, what we like to look at. We cannot ruin that in Summit. It'll devalue everybody's life here in town. So I hope you all vote to approve this ordinance.
Thank you.
Peter LaJoy, 124 Canoe Brook Parkway, Summit, New Jersey. First of all, I've always learned to not ask a question if I didn't know the answer in a public forum. The reason there are 7 parking spaces going to St. Teresa's is that a number of years ago, after City Hall was built, an arrangement was made to vacate Chestnut Street, and there was an exchange of land between the church and the city, where actually the city got more land than the church. Part and parcel of that was there was an agreement that the church retain its parking spaces and its loading dock. That was done by resolution, and it was, I believe, done by ordinance, and there's paperwork to support this. So this is not some gift, and before we start talking about things and creating fears, we should really understand what's happening. I think the settlement agreement, and I have to get back to it, I've read this before, and I'm going to read it again. Summit shall not be required to facilitate construction of a single 50-unit all-affordable development and agree to the maximum extent possible to rely on nonprofit developers to develop the 50 units of affordable housing. To suggest that the at-home project is a private activity is false. It's substantially funded with public money. And on top of that, in addition to that, if it falls short of funding, the city of Summit is going to have to issue bonds which the taxpayers are going to have to pay to cover the excess. And I'm sure there'll be overruns like there are in any projects. I was very intrigued by the idea of building this building on the Red Cross property. That was a nonprofit piece of property, and I think there's plenty of land there. The other thing I'd like to suggest is I was driving along Morris Avenue. You know, there's a number of vacant lots in Summit that could be used to build infill housing, and would be in keeping with the character of the neighborhoods and be much more appropriate for affordable housing. I support this resolution and this ordinance fully. I think that Burgess Associates has done an extremely professional job, having worked with planners on projects for many years, and I commend them and the council for your work.
Okay. Are there any other public comments? No? Okay, I'm going to ask my council members, does anybody need a break before? Okay. I would like to take a 5-minute break for everyone, and then I'll come back to council for their comments, okay?
I'm good. I'm just waiting.
Okay, thank you for your patience. Thank you for your patience, everyone. I'm going to close the public hearing, and the public portion is now closed, and I'm going to have our professionals answer all the comments and questions that were directed to them through public comment. Okay.
First one.
Who goes first?
The first.
Yep. And speak nice and loud and pull it close. Yeah.
The first question that came up was why a 15 or 20% set aside. The regulations promulgated by the Council on Affordable Housing have established that as the set-aside provisions, and that's what every municipality in the state does in fact follow. So that's dictated to all municipalities by that state statute.
Okay.
Okay. There was a question regarding, and I think it was the RAH1 zone. You want to?
There's a question.
I'm actually going to ask you guys to pause for 1 second. I'm going to get the microphone.
It's all right. They're going to get it.
Yeah. And just
Matt will get it.
Jay in the back room, if you could just make sure the microphone is on, the handheld.
I'll give you guys those.
Turn it on the
Okay,
side.
that's on, yep.
Beautiful.
All right. Thank you for the.
Check.
Thank you. Okay.
So the question pertained to the status essentially of the existing RAH1 zone. As far as I'm aware, it is a developed single-family subdivision, but we can certainly explore the extent to which there's a development opportunity there.
Okay.
There's been,
Microphone.
oh, sorry, excuse me. There were a lot of comments about the 50-unit provision in the settlement agreement. I would like to clarify that it is not false to claim that the city lacks vacant developable land. We have a court-approved vacant land adjustment where Fair Share Housing Center and the court did agree that the city of Summit does lack available vacant land to satisfy the entire obligation that was assigned to it. The city has, in fact, with a 13-unit surplus, satisfied that obligation that was adjusted down. The 50 units is part of what's called the unmet need, which is an aspirational obligation, where as the city develops and redevelops, that's a small r, redevelops, the city finds ways to promote the creation of affordable housing as that occurs, and that is the 50-unit term in the settlement agreement. The city is not required, as one gentleman said, to satisfy that obligation in one or any large-scale 100% affordable project that was approved by the court and agreed upon by Fair Share. It is to be scattered site throughout the city, and the city is not required to adopt a resolution of intent to bond, and that is required with 100% affordable projects. So the 50-unit obligation is being planned for. We have many properties that the city is looking at. As soon as those, we've had various groups and property owners approach the city with proposed projects. When those are ready to be made public, they will be. But I am very confident that the city will satisfy the 50-unit requirement in their settlement agreement.
Okay, another question regarding whether the municipality should wait until we have to address our fourth round obligation and put everything on hold. The reality is this is part of our third round obligation, not the fourth round obligation. But even more important than that is the fact that the fourth round housing need numbers are not going to be promulgated till mid-October. October 20th is the deadline date for when DCA, Department of Community Affairs, will be publishing the housing need numbers. And the scheduling, the timeline for the whole process to play out for the fourth round is that municipalities won't be adopting housing plans until sometime in early 2026, if I'm not mistaken, correct? Yeah. We don't want to wait that long, and it wouldn't be appropriate to do so. So that's why we are proceeding in the fashion, in the time frame that we are. The one thing I did want to comment upon is the fact, I know there was a lot of comments and questions about the at-home proposal. I just want to reiterate what we said at the very outset. This hearing is with respect to the ordinance that is before the council at the moment. It's not a comparative assessment of one versus the other. The governing body is obligated to make some determination on this particular ordinance. And that's why the focus from our presentation has been on that. There was a question about the concern about reopening the settlement agreement. I don't know if you wanted to handle that.
Sure. At this late of date, even if a project was going to be included in the city's settlement agreement, that requirement was for a specific plate of funding that has almost completely been earmarked at this point. So there is no reason to open the settlement agreement at this time. It's more to plan for round 4.
There were some comments about the issue of the planning board's consistency review. And there was a concern raised that, with the belief that the draft ordinance conflicts with the master plan rather than is consistent with it. And I did want to point out that when one does a consistency review, you are not obligated to affirmatively address each and every one of the goals in a master plan. I had pointed out 5 or 6 specific goals that we are consistent with, and based on that assessment and the overall thrust of the housing element and fair share plan and the land use plan goals and objectives, I felt comfortable that I could report to the planning board that there was a consistency that enabled them to file the report that they did to you. There was a specific comment about how we are taking, and we're obligated to take all reasonable steps to attempt to achieve the 50 units that Nancy had just mentioned. And there is a constitutional obligation to provide for affordable housing. But we're not obligated to address the entirety of that number. We have to make all reasonable steps to achieve it. And as was pointed out, we have addressed 50% of that obligation, or that provision of the settlement agreement. And there is discussions about how we can achieve the rest of that obligation over the next year, consistent with the time frame that we have to do so. There had been a comment about how, since the ordinance was only introduced 3 weeks ago, that this whole process seems to be moving too fast. I think somebody else had addressed that point from the public. But it is an associated comment regarding the issue
Joe,
of
can you just
nothing
bring
was
the
said
microphone?
about sustainability and some other related design issues. I would point out that in the body of the ordinance, even though I may not have presented this information in my brief overview, this ordinance does reference current regulations in the current DRO that identifies how all the provisions regarding sustainability and similar issues are to be addressed as part of any development application for this zone. The infamous number 16.
Yeah.
I did not get all those questions.
Okay.
He was rattling them all so fast. So
Yes.
maybe you could help me with
Yeah.
that.
Some of them were things that we already addressed, and my apologies, I don't mean to address you informally, but I only caught your first name, Diego. Like I said, there will be, as soon as other projects are solidified, those will be made public as to how the city will satisfy the remaining 25 units. We are in compliance with our settlement agreement. The settlement agreement will be judged when the city puts forth its 4th round plan. As of right now, the city has a judgment of compliance and repose. That means that we satisfied the court's requirements, we've satisfied the court master's requirements, and we satisfied fair share's requirements. We're moving forward with, when we have a plan approved by the court, now the city has to implement that plan, and that's exactly what they're doing. There's nothing that says that the city is out of compliance.
And as part of our upcoming 4th round plan, We are obligated to identify how each and every component of our third round settlement agreement and housing element and fair share plan has been affirmatively addressed. So that those issues will be addressed at the outset of the fourth round when we get to that point.
That's correct, and that is not for well over a year, so there's plenty of time to address everything. There was the question was, what if the court finds that we are not compliant? As long as the city moves forward with its plan and implements its plan, it is protected by the judgment of compliance and repose, which gives us immunity from builder's remedy lawsuits or other Mount Laurel litigation. There is an entire process that was recently revamped with the A4 bill that was passed, where it's going to be several years before we're deemed to be compliant, but in that time, as long as we follow the plan that's set out for us for round 4, the city will continue to have immunity from builder's remedy litigation. The next question was, what if the developer sits on the property? This can happen in 100% affordable projects as well as inclusionary projects. The control that really the city has at any of these points is rezoning the property. And when the developer comes in, it's a function of the market. We can't force them to build anything. We can't force a 100% affordable developer. I have several towns where we approved a project with a 100% affordable developer, and we're still waiting. We approved it at the beginning of round 3, and we're still waiting for them to go for funding. So that's not, it's not a function of whether it's 100% or inclusionary. It's a function of the market, and it's a function of funding. And then it's not my wheelhouse for parking or the debt, so I'm not going to answer those questions.
There had been a question raised about the 7 parking spaces, but I believe one of the members of the public adequately addressed that question.
Can we ask questions, Council President?
You know, let me just let them finish, only because
Okay.
I don't want them to get off track.
That's fair.
And then we can, and then we'll go back, right?
That's all the questions I have. Do you have?
There had been a question raised about density, and the comment had been that, you need 50 units to the acre in order to make a project happen today. I want to give you some background on that issue. The COA regulations actually talk about a minimum presumptive density of 6 or 8 units to the acre to accommodate affordable housing. Now, that was set some years ago, and the numbers have changed over time. But your zoning ordinance, and I'll put aside this draft ordinance for a second, but the zoning ordinance in town has a range of densities going from 12 to 20 to the acre, and in one instance, it allows, with certain bonus provisions, up to 29 units to the acre. This draft ordinance talks about 30 units to the acre. So within the context of the range of densities that this municipality has contemplated over the years, you have always been, quite frankly, a little above and beyond what's the minimum presumptive densities. And when I compare it to many other municipalities, and our firm represents, 47 municipalities around the state, I can't think of many at all that have the kind of range of densities and scale of densities that you already have. So the 30 units to the acre, I would suggest, is in fact a high-density development. And one of the things we have to recognize when we're doing planning for a municipality is that planning is a balance of many competing interests. And we talked about some of those this evening. We talked about how you want to have a design that's in scale with the community's character as a whole. You don't want anything that's inconsistent with that character. And you want a development pattern that you find reasonable in terms of its intensity of use. And I would suggest that doing 30 to the acre here certainly is representative of that philosophy.
I just wanted to address, there's a question about, there's a comparison drawn between the income that would have been generated from the Broad Street West project as compared to this. So we would just acknowledge that this is, a scaled-down development, so, it's reasonable to understand that it would be less valuable from that perspective. It's not 5 stories, it's not 150 units, it's 4 stories, it's fewer units. So from a land value perspective, the city would get less for that. And I believe that because that was through the redevelopment process, that there was a pilot payment in lieu of taxes being considered. So there was some, consideration there with respect to how much, the city would get versus the Board of Ed, et cetera. So I think that was the comment.
Yeah, tied in with that is the fact that this draft ordinance has a number of provisions to ensure a certain scale that I think can be contrasted with that other project. We're talking about a cap on the maximum linear building length of 180 feet. My recollection was that other project was 315 feet
Over
long?
400.
500, excuse me. Lost my head for a second. Over 500 feet long. It's 2.5, 2 3/4 the length of football fields. So, when we talk about scale and intensity, all of those things come into play when you're trying to come up with a reasonable balance. This ordinance also provides for that open space feature that I spoke about earlier, 9,000 square feet of open space feature that includes a minimum 100-foot linear dimension along Broad Street to ensure that it'll have a visual amenity and impact to the community as well. And all of that represents, the balance of competing interests that we often try to plan for. Are there any other?
Just one more. I think Joe already touched on it, but there was a question just about how do we control the design, the materials, and the timeline of the development. And again, Joe touched on it. The effort here was not to design the project, but to create a zoning framework that, we would understand, what different development outcomes could be, but ultimately the planning board will be tasked with reviewing the project and ensuring that the ultimate development is consistent with the character of Summit, as well as compliant with the current development regulations ordinance.
Do you guys have any more? Nancy, do you have any? Okay. The only thing I got stuck on is parking and debt. Maybe Michael, what was the question specifically? Do you know?
Yeah.
Seven-seaters? Oh, it wasn't seven-seater parking? Oh, okay.
Spaces. Well, there was one about, I believe the proposed ordinance, were you gonna lose public parking, and then is the $6 million debt lower than it was before? That's what I have, so I don't know. Hopefully I got that question right.
I know, I really want to know the question. Oh, wait, we got it, Diego. We got it, thank you. I think,
Good? All right, go for
wait,
it.
do you have it, or you want?
Not the
Okay, Councilwoman Hamlin has it.
financial question, but the public parking question.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Just say the question.
So it's interesting because Michael and I have been talking about this for probably the last 2 weeks or so. And I was just talking with Councilman Minner about it. The one thing we don't talk about in finance is, a lot of times, is our annual debt service. And Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, our annual debt service for this year is at 6.5? Yep. So it's 6.5. So I called Michael one day and I said, Michael, can you explain to me, how much of our annual debt service is that firehouse? And he said, well, why do you need to know that? I said, Mike, because I need to know. I need to explain to the public what this means. What's the tax impact for the resident? So after a few days and asking our CFO to pull all of the reports about how much Cedar Street, how many of our bonds, principal and interest for Cedar Street and the firehouse. So I have this in my binder tonight, and I only have the period beginning January 15th, 2023. So in the intermission, I said to Michael, I really want to get this information from the beginning of the firehouse. I said, it's important for me to understand, and it's important for me to explain to the audience that we still need to pay for the $17 or $18 million firehouse that is being built. That's just a reality, and that does impact our debt service level. And that does impact how we make decisions as a council. So Michael, you can probably speak to it a little bit more. Initially, when we do sell the property, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, Cedar Street, I believe, is about $1.5 million, and we've spent about $170,000 so far on bonds, and that bond's coming due in July.
When we pay off the note in July, we'll be down to about $1.43 million of that original $1.55 million when we purchased the property.
So so Cedar Street and the firehouse are about $1.1 million of debt service per year?
When we pay off the note this year for Cedar, we've spent approximately $189,000 principal interest for the office Cedar Street building. And then there's the firehouse, and right now I think our payment this year is $941,000 related to the firehouse portion. We'll go up to a little over $1 million in a couple of years. So that's what we're paying. The way I look at this is, however, whenever we sell this property and the purchase price that we received through a bid process, we'll immediately have to pay off that Cedar Street note. And then whatever's remaining, really to look at, you're paying off. The way I've always tried to think about it is that you would use that delta of, so let's just say it's $5 million. The $3.5 million you would be just applying towards our debt service. And in our budget, we have a reserve for municipal debt service as a revenue, and we would just take that in, whatever we receive, to pay that portion of our annual debt service payment. So it will be up to over $1 million, about $1.5 million, I think. I'm sorry, $1,051,000 is the amount it will go up to.
Each year?
For many years, it will be about a little over $1 million, yeah.
Yeah, this year I think it's
941. Well, 54 this year, 941 next year.
Yeah, 954 this year, 941 next year. But the one question that I'd like answered, and I asked Andy if we could talk about it in finance, is what percentage does that represent of our debt service level? And I think from my calculations, and I'm not a mathematician, but I think it's around 17%, but I haven't conferred or had that explicit. But I think it's really important for the public to understand that, and we've spent a lot of time talking about the need to sell these properties.
Can I add some more background?
Yeah, absolutely. Councilman
Yeah.
Vartan?
Thank you. We did talk about debt service like a ton when I was on finance, and you've got the answer. It's in your budget binder. If you look at municipal debt increases between 2019 and 2023, those huge jumps year over year were a direct result of big capital spending in the 2010s, right? Almost $8 million in 2012, almost $9 million in 2013, 7.5 again in 2014, 11 million in 2015. A lot of those years were not big projects or buildings. They were just more capital spending, more road projects, more vehicle replacements, more. After the new debt was issued for the firehouse, we undertook a multi-year process to dramatically reduce capital spending, not because it was easy, not because we didn't want to do other things, because it was necessary. We went from $55 million total indebtedness of the city in 2021 to $69 million in 2022, and then back to $65 million again in 2023. So debt payments were going up every single year until 2023, and now this year they've finally started to come down. So that's just a little more context to what you're saying.
Well, can I just say that I think when we were buying the
Councilwoman
fire...
Hamel, just
May
she may
respond or no? Sorry, Council President. Greg, the one thing I think that I've heard you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when we were building the firehouse, and you continually said we need to do this for the revenue, one of the reasons was that debt service was our third largest line item. Is that correct?
I don't know when you're talking about what I was saying,
Okay.
but I will reiterate the need to have built the new firehouse.
Yes, perfect.
And we did have a bipartisan group of council people who sat with Fire Chief Evers and Deputy Chief Nelson, and we sat there and we went through a lot of the designs and we scaled back a lot of stuff. And there is no way this building would ever have cost less than the moment that we decided. We had the political courage as a council. We voted unanimously, right, to say we're going to get this done because our firefighters need it. Because if you're a firefighter now, you're much more likely to die from cancer that you're going to get from being exposed to materials, right? We decided this has gone on too long. We need proper areas for decontamination, proper areas for training, and we had to get that project done. So, and we had to do it. So, and then we spent the next several years budgeting responsibly as a result. So, yeah.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to open it up to council comments or questions. Would you like to start?
Me? I don't want to start.
No, you don't want to start. Okay. Councilman Boyer.
No, I mean, I'll wait until we wrap it up with statements and.
Oh, yeah, okay. Do you have any questions for the professionals following up? Okay.
I do not.
I do have another question, though.
Sure. Yeah.
We've talked about this before. We can't find that agreement with St. Teresa's, right?
May I make a comment?
Administrator Rogers first.
So there was an agreement when they land swapped years ago. We studied that in great deal. I think what you're probably thinking of was whether there was an actual deed restriction ever made, and there was no finding of that. However, there is an agreement about preserving spaces in our lot for St. Teresa's use.
And that's a resolution.
And that was in a form of resolution.
Okay.
There was an agreement an ordinance when they did that land swap years ago. I don't remember specifics of that, but there are such agreements.
Okay. Councilwoman Hamlet.
Greg, you're right to bring that up. I think it's an important question. And I was sitting here trying to find my email box from, gosh, I think it was 2021 or 2022 when Broad Street West Conversations. And God bless his soul, Bill Callahan, who passed away during the entire Broad Street West process. I couldn't find my login, and I'm a little choked up talking about it. Bill passed away. And geez, Rosie, how old was he? Must have been.
I don't
you remember
know.
Bill Callahan?
But he was, yeah.
But Bill was on a hunt for this document, and I have to find my password to my email because I'm almost positive he went to the county, and he found out some information. So I'm hoping that I can find my password to my email, and remember what he was saying because I remember that it was very important. Bill Callahan had a lot to say about that, and I think it's important that we do find that just to memorialize it. I just have to go back into my notes because I have a lot of information on that.
Thank you. Any other council questions? I have a couple questions. Okay. Can you, Nancy or Joe, whichever, explain for the audience GAP funding? You were talking about specifically for the All Affordable Project. I think just for the benefit, because people are in the room. Can you just explain that a little bit further?
Sure. So 100% affordable projects are funded in several ways, and I'm certainly not the authority
Right,
on all
yeah,
of that.
I know.
But some of it is through a traditional mortgage. There's other investors. You can also go to the state for funding. The funding source that we were talking about the settlement agreement was called the Affordable Housing Production Fund. That was actually funded with COVID money from the federal government, and it must be spent by the end of this year. That the requirement was that you had to be in a settlement agreement with a municipality that was court approved, and that's where that settlement agreement discussion came from. But that money is almost all allocated. It's basically gone. There's really no time unless you're already moving to get it done. There's also tax credits. So there's 9% tax credits and 4% tax credits. I'm not going to get into all that. You'll all fall asleep. But anyway, so it's very competitive to go for 9% tax credits. There are 9% tax credits presumably fund the entire project. Usually the city would have to, or any municipality would have to give the land or buy the land and donate it to whoever is doing the project. However, as a requirement for going for public funding, a municipality has to have a resolution of intent to bond if there is a shortfall in funds. And that's what we're talking about, gap financing. So the city gives the land, maybe gives some money from its trust fund, the project still comes up short. That happened very often in 2021 when that construction costs skyrocketed and all of a sudden 100% affordable developers came back and said, sorry, town, we now have a $3 million gap just because of the price of lumber. And that's happened. So the municipality is on the hook for whatever is not financed and whatever is not provided by the state for funding. So that can be $50,000. It usually isn't. It's usually in the millions when that happens. So, and it's really not predictable up front when you have a proposed project. So,
Okay.
do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, they covered it nicely.
Thank you.
I think it's important to just thinking about, as we have everybody in the audience, this is my first blush in, I'm not the professional, and when we get our advice, we're leaning on you guys. And so I'm just going to say, comic relief. That's okay.
That was way more entertaining than affordable housing, so that's fine.
It's all right. I've learned a lot about development in the last couple of years, and I'm even learning more about affordable housing, and the overlay has been quite an experience in itself. From a funding perspective, and I think this is just important for context, in terms of financing, Tom, I had Tim O'Connor take a look at the type of tax ratables that we would get at the Promenade building, right? There's about 22 units, there's retail on the bottom, approximately, and maybe we're not getting enough, but we are getting about 165,000, just average, of tax ratables each year. And so how much would we potentially get in an all-affordable housing building in contrast?
Well, not having exactly run the
Right, I know, you don't have
having
to put you on the
exactly
spot.
right. So
sorry.
it would be significantly less.
Because this is
obviously.
just an
Right.
important.
So we're talking about a
understanding.
shortfall probably in the six figures. You know what I mean? So $100,000 difference. And again, that's based on information provided by the city's tax assessor, which I happened to look at earlier today. So I concur with your assessment or statement.
Okay, and you can absolutely. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, also, 100% affordable projects require a pilot of 6.28% of the revenue. So, so it would be a fixed number that you would get. I'm sorry. Sorry, I apologize. I thought I was close enough. 100% affordable projects, if they go for state funding, require a pilot payment in lieu of taxes of about 6.28% of the revenue.
Okay, and just this is the way that I understand it. So if an affordable housing developer, any developer came to us, they purchase the land, and then we help pay back that purchase price through our affordable housing trust fund. Is that typical, or would that be just potentially what we could work out with a developer who comes to us?
It depends. There's agreements where they range, because all real estate's different.
Okay,
So
okay.
some developers have obtained they'll purchase the property and then come to the municipality and then ask for a significant donation from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund toward the project. Others, if there's municipally owned property, they ask that it's given to them for $1, and then that offsets some of the cost. I believe it's about $500,000 a unit for financing for a 100% affordable project. So
How much do you know what the cost was for the Chatham location?
I don't know.
Was
Do
it
you?
Was it 6 million? I thought it was 6 million. Oh, unit. Oh, yeah, gotcha. Okay, no, that's fine. Okay.
I believe that's correct.
Hold on, Councilwoman. Now you totally sidetracked me here. Okay, so they would require a pilot. That's where I was going with this. How much is in our affordable housing trust fund currently? Can we say that?
I believe
Publicly?
it's approximately 3.5 million.
Matt, maybe you can come join us at the microphone, just so you're not.
Just real quick, Matt Deloria, Municipal Housing Liaison for the city. It's about like 1.98 million.
Okay. And so, Matt, maybe don't go too far. So if if an affordable housing developer came to us, they gave us money for a purchase price of the land, and we had to take money out of our trust fund, what would be the reasonable amount that you would have to keep within the trust fund for administrative costs and so forth?
Well, I mean, there's always money to be kept in there because we do have to pay professionals, but the fund is to be used for the purpose of developing housing. So each case is unique, but we would always be looking at how we could maximize those dollars, which purpose is to facilitate housing. So we would be interested in participating in the most meaningful way that we could with those funds, and have done so for round after round. So it would really depend on each situation.
But if you...
We try not to hold back because that's what the development fees are collected for, to develop units. And we try very hard to make sure that that's where the majority is spent. The law says you can only spend up to 20%, and we certainly do rely on our professionals, but we do want the windfall of those funds to go to development of housing.
But if you spent it all at once, what then? Would we be able to rehab or do any other particular project in town?
Well, I mean, no, you wouldn't. You would deplete the fund. The
Okay.
fund is established so that we can act in a way that can take care of our obligation. So yes, by draining it completely, it would certainly limit us to other things. Absolutely.
Okay.
It's a balance. You know, you don't want to keep it in a saving, and at the same time, obviously, you want to be very careful about where you spend it to make sure that as things come along, that you have the funds to be able to act when necessary.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
And they do have to be spent in specific ways too. There's affordability assistance where about 1/3 of your affordable housing trust fund has to be used for that program. That's down payment assistance, security deposits, other ways of helping low and moderate income households afford specific units. So, and then we do have money reserved for rehabilitation, sorry, wrong R word, rehabilitation as well. So we do have those programs that we have to earmark money for.
Okay. Councilwoman Hamlet?
Yes, and then can you just talk, Nancy, 2 quick questions, 2 for you and 1 for Joe. Nancy, if you could just please talk a little bit about, one of the things that I've been advocating for recently is using the National Housing Trust Fund to get smaller, maybe 1 to 6 units. It doesn't look like we've used the National Housing Trust Fund yet. And is that something that we could look into, using the National Housing Trust Fund for smaller units? And secondly, that was my first question. Secondly, can you talk a little bit about the developer fees? And then Joe, my question for you is, we talked about it today, but can you just educate the public a little bit on the minimum lot line setbacks at Broad, Cedar, Morris, and the South lines in comparison to some other projects, just so that just so that the public has an understanding of what that means in the ordinance, and because I think it's important to understand.
Okay. Under the current ordinance, the ordinance has no minimum front, side, or rear setback requirement. So you could build to all the lot lines if a developer so chose. In our draft ordinance, the ordinance talks about anywhere from 10 to 25 or so foot setbacks. And on top of that, I think it's Morris, we require a 10-foot sidewalk. Other streets, it's a 4-foot sidewalk, if I'm not mistaken. The current ordinance doesn't have any such regulatory controls. So in terms of design issues, the draft ordinance has a lot of the kinds of controls that you typically see in ordinances that are lacking in the B zone at present.
So I've heard a lot from the public in the last couple of days. Well, how does this compare? How does this compare? And the devil's really in the details, right? So Broad Street, in the overlay zone right now, it's 15 feet. You know, the container ship was 5, just to give everybody 5 setback. Cedar Street in the MBC overlay zone is 10 feet. Container ship was the same. Morris this overlay zone is 20 feet, right? And then the other project was 5. And the setback at the south lot lines of the tract in our overlay zone are 40, and to your point, in the other one it was 0. So there's a significant setback that is really important for the public to understand.
Yes, and I stand corrected. I said 25. It's actually 40 feet to the south lot lines. Thank you. So, there's a lot more substantive green space around the building that you will see that you wouldn't see otherwise.
Okay, good.
The, the National Trust Fund, I do have to look into that. Financing projects, like I said before, is not my, not my strong suit. But what I would like to commend the public as well as the Mount Laurel Subcommittee and the council is that we have lots and lots of ideas. And I think they've uncovered every rock in the city and have been actively looking at any possible way to create affordable housing. So I do commend them on that. And then tell me your second question again.
Just talk a little bit about developer fees, and then we can wrap
Oh,
up.
development fees, yes. Okay, so we have a development fee ordinance. It
Sorry,
is-
the developer fees within affordable housing.
Oh, developer
Right, like they put their fees in the pro forma, correct? So developers are making money
You
in
mean
this.
yes.
Right.
Oh, yes,
Right,
yes.
Okay.
There is a developer fee. I'm not terribly clear how it's calculated for each project, but there is money set aside in every pro forma for 100% affordable projects for fees, because they are running a business. They do, need to make money. But yes, that is part of all of the funding. Yes. Sorry, I didn't mean to. I could have gone off on a tangent on that.
Okay. Any other council comments, questions? Nope. Okay. Councilman Plowski.
Yeah, I just have a couple of comments. So, a lot of people have spoken tonight about that we're trying to strike a balance here, and there are a whole lot of factors that are out there. But what I've been hearing most from residents who've asked me questions are, how does it compare to what would have been the Broad Street West development? And what I've told them and what I'll tell everybody here today is you got to keep in mind that Broad Street West was a project, right? It was drawn out. What we're considering here tonight is an ordinance to establish an overlay zone.
Bob, can you speak up a little bit?
Which is really the parameters for potential projects on the same parcels. And the few things that have been most important to the people who have reached out to me are size, density, and green space. So how does it compare? For density, with 140 units and 220,000 square feet of floor area, the BSW proposal was big and dense. The kind of project permitted in the overlay zone that we're considering tonight will be neither. There'll be no more than 48 units and 80,000 square feet, which is approximately a third of the number of units and approximately a third of the square footage that BSW would have been. As for size, with 5 stories, 65 to 70 feet tall and 485 feet long, the Broad Street West structure would have covered 73% of the properties that we're talking about here. The kind of project permitted in the overlay zone that we're talking about tonight is modest in comparison. At 3 stories and 36 feet high, with a 4th story possible, but set back at least 10 feet from the perimeter of the main structure, any structures may cover no more than 35% of the lot. As for green space, people felt that the 2,500 square feet of green space offered by BSW was far too little. The kind of project permitted in the overlay zone we're talking about tonight requires no less than 9,000 feet of contiguous green space. So we addressed a lot of different concerns here tonight, but on most fronts, based on the significant community feedback that we've heard over the past few years, the possible projects in this overlay zone really do compare favorably with Broad Street West, and I think strike the balance that most of the people in the community have been looking for. And I'm going to support this.
Okay, Councilwoman Hamlet?
A couple of comments. First, one we may have missed. Did we address, I think it was, who talked about the planning board and not, I think it might have been Claire Toth, or the planning board and not being able to speak at the planning board meeting? There was a resident.
Andrew Walker, I think.
Anyway, regardless, I don't think we discussed that, but I did want to point out, I serve on the planning board, and I did want to read a transcript from the planning board from our planning board attorney, Steve Warner. And he mentioned in the meeting that sometimes the question arises, is this a public hearing? So this is on May 28th during the consistency review, and he says sometimes the question arises, is this a public hearing? The answer is simply no. It is not a public hearing. The public, and nor is the planning board, considering the merits of the ordinance, whether or not you're in favor, has nothing against, that has nothing to do with the planning board's narrow statutory authority on a master plan consistency review. In fact, the Cox Treatise, right, Tom, is that how I say it? The Cox Treatise?
Cox book, the Cox Treatise.
The Cox book, the Cox Treatise refers to it and says clearly the statute does not require a hearing, nor does it require the matter to be open to public comment, and no one is deprived of an opportunity to speak concerns raised by the ordinance, because when the matter is returned to the governing body, the Common Council, with the board's recommendations on master plan consistency review, that is when there's a public hearing, and that is when all members of the public have an opportunity to weigh in on the actual ordinance itself. So again, the narrow frame of reference and authority for the planning board is simply whether the ordinance is not inconsistent with the master plan. I'll keep it shorter. But real quick, and I'll wrap up because I know I've spoken a lot tonight. Somebody said, what gets done reveals our true values. I think it was the lawyer from Whitridge who said that. Her name escapes me. What gets done reveals our true values. And if you Google the words City of Summit Annual Report of Affordable Housing Activity, and then you can plug in the dates from 2019 to 2020, all the way up until today. If you Google those words and plug in the dates, in fact, Rosie, for the record, I'm going to submit all of those since 2019. And you'll see this was actually from 2019. I pulled it up just the other day. And I was so impressed. And this gentleman right here, Matt Delary, one of his main goals as our city employee is to produce this. And if you read it, it talks about all of the things we're doing as a city. It talks about what we're doing with the set-asides, with the affordable housing, with the Summit Housing Authority. So if you read those reports, you'll see that we are getting things done, and that does reveal our true values. I was really happy to see the Summit Housing Authority attorney here tonight. I'd like to thank him for coming. We sure do have a lot of work to do with the Summit Housing Authority, and in fact, in our settlement agreement, is the continued need to rehab those units at Summit Housing Authority. So I'm looking forward to Ms. Holmes, you working with him and accomplishing that goal within our settlement agreement. Regarding the Summit Affordable Housing Corporation, I met with Mr. McBride and Mr. White and members of that organization, and later, when we decided that that was not the best project for this property, I actually met with one of the gentlemen again. And I was really excited to learn how I could learn about affordable housing tax credits, how we could do smaller projects. Could we do a smaller project with them? How do we do it? How to teach me about the National Housing Trust Fund. Spent about an hour and a half really trying to learn how we can get 1 to 6 units, maybe 5, in Summit. I called Michael one day. I said, Michael, we got to work on this. We got to work on getting these smaller units because we're not going to be able to accommodate all of these 100% affordable housing sites. So it is my true intention to learn from people like Mr. McBride and Mr. White regarding all of those opportunities, and I welcome the opportunity to still do so, and I hope that that's not lost. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that Summit is fully built out. Our vacant land, last I checked, was 2.34, and Tom and I go rounds every week about what should and should not be included. In fact, I think I may have found a house with a tennis court on it that shouldn't be on it. But Summit really is truly built out, and I know that I will keep Tom on his toes, and we're going to get in the car and look at the vacant land analysis. But I just wanted to say, thank you to the Planning Board and Chairman Zucker for unanimously approving this, and thank you. Somebody mentioned the professionals, the master plan, the DRO. In everything that is in this ordinance tonight is consistent with what's in the DRO. And that is what the professionals and the residents of Summit have been working on and have confidence in that. This we did not take lightly, and it took a lot of work. So thank you for all your time.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hamlet.
Thank you, Council President.
Councilman
So the comments from residents that have resonated most significantly with me were those that mentioned that this overlay zone, providing a maximum of 7 affordable housing units, is probably our last chance to build much-needed affordable housing in Summit. Excuse me? Well, it's also a maximum. You can get more than 7 units on this? Can you explain to me how we can get more than 7 units, 7 affordable housing units?
Yeah, go ahead.
Joe, do you want to talk about so we're requiring a minimum of 7. Do you want to talk or do you want me to? It's up to you. I have it down, but we're requiring a minimum of 7, which is 7 out of, you can go ahead.
Oh, we permit 30 units to the acre.
Just into the microphone.
We permit 30 to the acre. 30 to the acre times 1.6 acres is 48 units. And if you do rentals, that's technically it's 8. But if you do it for a sale unit, it's 20%. So and then it would be 10 affordable units.
Okay.
But can I just, so, okay, but let's run the scenario. So if you have 30 units times 15%.
On 1.6 acres, don't forget that.
Right, so 30 units, 15%, 1.6 acres.
That gives you 8 affordable units, 7.2, but you round up.
Right. So we're requiring a minimum. So if there's 48 units, how many affordable housing units are we going to have?
9.
Sorry, not 40. I'm sorry, not 48 units. If we have, so there's 2. There can be two buildings, 2 possible buildings.
But the total lot size is 1.6
Right.
acres. So 1.6 acres times 30 units to the acre is 48 units. And then you take at 15% if they're rentals, that would be 8 units. And 48 at 20% would be 10 units. 9.6 rounds up to 10.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for clarifying that. So that's significantly, so 10. It's 3 more than what I was thinking here. But it falls significantly short of what we should and could be building in this, what we should aim for. With this project, we are closing the door on the opportunity to make a real impact in terms of much needed affordable housing in our city. I am a little disappointed that we're not aiming for more here, which we can and should be doing. And so I will be voting against this.
Thank you.
You want to go in order?
Yeah.
That's fine. So
We don't have to go in order. If someone
No,
else
that's
wants to
fine.
go.
That's fine. I'll go now. So I think it's fair for the community to express concerns around policy. We've had a lot of people here tonight. We've had a lot of emails earlier today. I share concerns about affordable housing. People in the community and members of At Home and Summit will notice I have not fully endorsed the At Home and Summit proposal. Frankly, it's because I'm not sure it's exactly the right thing to do. I'm not sure this overlay is exactly the right thing to do either. What I have learned from my 6 years on council is that we shouldn't just go ahead with something because we think it's right. We need to understand what the community is thinking. Thankfully, it's easier when they say it to us directly. And it is our responsibility as council people to sell it, to bring the community along with us. Alas, that is why council ended the agreement for Broad Street West, removed the area in need of redevelopment. And I do share the concerns about how what we're doing here could be perceived by fair share housing and what it means for the land we have available elsewhere. I'm glad that our council president and my colleagues are learning about affordable housing and the tax credits available, but we are running out of time. All due respect also to our affordable housing attorney and our planner, what's happening in other municipalities is nice to know, but I think it's fair to say that a judge who is determining our compliance is not going to consider what is happening anecdotally in other communities. They're going to look at what we're doing only, the opportunities we have had, the plans we have rejected, the moves we have made. So tonight, Nancy, I believe at the last meeting, the mayor said we will meet our 50-unit goal. It seems confident. It seemed confident both times it was said. If we do have actual proposals or plans on the table to meet the rest of the 50-unit obligation, all members of council need to be immediately brought up to speed I understand the Mount Laurel Committee has been meeting, but I am not aware of any pending plans. This has been, you can maybe hear in my voice, this has been quite the saga for the entire time I have been on council. If there is some great project waiting in the wings that might make this vote easier, please tell me what it is. If we can't do that, I believe we could have and should have pursued a higher minimum set aside for affordable housing. I did advocate strongly for that in committee, but that did not make it to the final version of this ordinance. I do not like replacing the Chestnut Street parking spots for use by Summit residents with spots on the street either. That was another big complaint we heard last year. I do also wonder about the spaces for St. Teresa's, and we've charged other developers in the past before when they want to permanently remove parking spaces from public circulation. So we do need to log back into whatever that is and chase down that agreement and send it around to the rest of council. I think it's also fair for the community to express concerns around process. The community is correct that other than this meeting right now, there have been no standalone meetings dedicated to this topic. There was no opportunity for the public to speak at the planning board. I'm not criticizing the process or procedures, just a statement of fact that this is the only opportunity the public has had to speak on this topic. No task force or committee was created. The process has moved, in my opinion, comparatively quickly, as government is typically pretty slow. I understand it's our financial obligation to do something with this property, but I don't know why we're rushing to the extent that we can't take the summer, have more meetings, decide if we want to change it, and then have final adoption in September. I don't think we lose that much time in the grand scheme of things. It's not like a developer would be ready to knock the building down and start construction as soon as the fire department moves out at this point anyway. I'll say what I've said at a few meetings in a row now, better to get it right than to get it done quickly. And if we say, well, let's just pass it tonight and we'll amend it later, then we're going to lose that time reintroducing it again later, going back to the planning board again later anyway. So we get to decide as a group whether we want the public input up front before we do it or input after the fact, and it probably takes the same amount of time. So I do, because I'm highly conflicted, want to make a motion to table the ordinance so that we can reconsider it at a later date.
My second.
So you have to do a roll call on the motion to table.
Okay.
At this time.
Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Boyer?
Nay.
Ms. Hamlet?
Nay.
Mr. Miniger?
Aye.
Mr. Pulowski?
Nay.
Mr. Smallwood?
Nay.
Mr. Vartan?
Aye.
President Allen?
Nay. Okay. Motion
The motion failed.
fails. Okay.
So now, if
So we
you're
can
gonna-
continue to discuss,
You
right?
can discuss it, or you can call the vote.
No, I'd like to give everybody an opportunity. So I just want to make sure, Councilman Vartan, you're done?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Council President. Wow, that was the most convincing vote I've had thus far. How did we get here? For a lot of people that are watching right now, I just want to reiterate a couple of things. So in 2019, the council designated Broad Street West managers, a partnership with L&M and Toll Brothers, as the redevelopers for the Broad Street West redevelopment project. However, over the ensuing years, council meetings were dominated by objections to Broad Street West project. Residents of Summit took divisive action by hiring their own planner and attorney, collecting over 1,000 signatures opposing the plan, holding meetings, and educating the public about the issues. As a Tapped Into Summit article noted, if Helen of Troy was known to have a face that launched 1,000 ships, then the proposed Broad Street West project was the redevelopment concept that launched 1,000 lawn signs. Residents demanded that the project comply with the city's master plan, scrutinizing every aspect, including its height, size, parking provisions, appearance, and financials. Although the prior administration negotiated in good faith with L&M and Toll Brothers, the redevelopment agreement was ultimately ended. So where are we now? Tonight, you've heard from professionals about the Morris Broad Crossroads Overlay Zone, which the Planning Board asserts is consistent with the master plan. Planning Board Chairman John Zucker stated that this overlay provides an opportunity to maximize the value of this property and advance projects. He also noted that the Planning Board has been evaluating this for years, remarking that this is really what we've been looking for. I believe the prior administration acted with integrity in their efforts to redevelop this property. These were dedicated volunteers who sacrificed time away from their families to do what they believed was best. They laid the groundwork for us to learn from their challenges. What we learned is that the people ultimately hold the power, and we are here to execute their will, and another Broad Street West will not be tolerated. Moving forward, this is not a zero-sum game. Let me be clear. A vote to adopt this ordinance will not be a win for any political party or politician. This is a win for Summit residents. Adopting this ordinance means we are stepping away from the redevelopment business and simply taking into account the residents' strong aversion for what we should not do or should not be built. In conclusion, I support this ordinance. And as the former mayor of New York, Mr. LaGuardia, once said, there is no Democratic or Republican way of cleaning the streets. Likewise, there is no Democratic or Republican way of cleaning up this issue. We simply must do what makes sense. And repeating the same mistakes is not an option. I ask that we, as a town, put aside our political differences and help this administration move Summit forward. Thank you, Council President.
Councilman Smallwood?
This happened during the campaign last year, and it's happening now. I gotta follow this guy. So, when I decided to run for council last year because I was totally against the city being in the redevelopment business, deciding what was going to be there. Ultimately, we know that the fire department will be moving to the new firehouse. There is a plot of land that is city-owned that needs to be redeveloped. I was against the city deciding what goes there, especially when I found out what was going to go there. So one of the things I campaigned on was the fact that we should not be in the redevelopment business. We should put a for sale sign on it, set some parameters on the area that needs to be sold, so that we could we could sell it to a developer that will maximize the amount of money that we can generate for that piece of property, and have the professional developers come to the city of Summit, not just council, but to the residents of Summit, to determine what could go there. Tonight is a significant step in setting those parameters on what a developer can build there. In terms of maximizing the amount of money that we're able to generate, I understand that, having a pilot program that we would have been able to get to, I believe, retain 95% of the sale. However, we also need to consider over the next 30 years, there's going to be a tax abatement. So over a long period of time, there's no money being generated so that will help pay for our schools. We are not deciding that tonight. We are deciding what our professional planners have decided and our planning board unanimously voted for, which I'm relying on because I am not a professional developer, professional planner. I'm relying on their expertise to determine what is the best parameters that could be set in this particular land. I am all for this, and I will be in support of it, because I think that's one of the reasons why I was elected last year, is because that's what I ran on. I want to maximize the amount of money that we can generate from this, and it is not up to us as a council to determine a containership. It is up to the professionals, it is up to the developers in the bidding process to come to the city of Summit and present what their projects would be. And, in terms, Councilman Vartan, the last couple meetings, I've noticed that you've been extremely concerned about parking. However, I don't remember you ever being that concerned about parking when we lost over 100 spaces at Broad Street parking garage. So the other thing that you mentioned tonight was the fact that we're running out of time to build and meet our affordable housing obligations. But at the same time, you just said we should pause, hold off, table this, and wait till the fall. Are we running out of time, or do you want to pause this? So I don't understand that concept. So with that, I want to thank our professional planners, all the hard work that went into this, the planning board that has really looked into this and unanimously passed this. I would hope that this council would trust the planning board and unanimously pass this tonight.
Thank you, Councilman. Okay. Mr. Burgess, how many overlay zones do we have in town?
Currently 7.
Or Tom?
7 exist.
7?
Okay, so just to be clear, we've done this before.
At least 7 times.
Okay. And this process doesn't end here tonight.
This is the first step.
There will be more public input.
Certainly.
Okay, and something to be clear, because you might have said it, but I want to make sure it's very clear, is that the bid process will be written, and when it goes out, we will be building to the overlay zone, not we will specify that we are building to the overlay zone and not the B zone.
That is stipulated in the ordinance, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear. Councilwoman Hamlet?
Whenever you're done. Just a couple quick clarifications. I did want to, I understand your concerns that perhaps we need more affordable housing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we can incentivize in the RFP process to have more affordable housing.
Yes, you can do
Right,
that.
okay.
Certainly.
So that's number one, and I think we would all, if we could get more affordable housing, obviously, we would certainly try to do that. When you say there's going to be more public input, Council President, I just want to clarify for the public that once a developer, the RFP process has been selected, the public-facing process at that point would really be at the planning or the zoning board, depending on the use, correct, Mr. Burgess?
Correct, yes.
So if you, don't like the parking or the traffic or the building, if it's not something that's covered by this big DRO, that's the public-facing process, and that's truly how this was intended.
Okay, thank you. And just to be finally clear, in terms of looking at the zoning, can you just briefly say what you did in order to come up with what is in this ordinance?
Yeah. So, for a while now, we obviously knew that the former, redevelopment plan was going to revert back to the B zone. And we also understood that the B zone was not the future of the site because of the permitted uses, because of the lack of development controls, because of the constraints on development. So we understood that in order to, move forward and come up with a developable plan for the site that we thought, the community in general would accept and would achieve all of the public purposes that were, set forth in a number of community meetings over the years, that we started to look at, what could be developed there. And in order to arrive at a zoning framework, we looked at Summit's existing zoning in the DRO. Most notably, we looked at the Gateway 1 zone and what has been developed there. And that site exists It's bound by Parmley Place to the north, DeForest to the south, and Summit Ave to the east. So it basically takes up one block. It's a mixed-use development. So the scale of what we're proposing is similar in some respects to that. And as board planners for both the planning board and zoning board, we're familiar with recent land use board approvals, which include all residential, 100% residential projects, not affordable, but as well as mixed-use projects. So we understand what's been acceptable at both the planning board and the zoning board. And so this, effort seeks to combine what we've learned through that analysis.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much. I do want to thank everybody who came here and spoke tonight. And I don't, it's been said, and I'm just going to reiterate, that when we talk about affordable housing and how it looks and how it's built, is not binary. It's not you have either or. We've had discussions where we absolutely I value affordable housing, this council values affordable housing, councils before us. I think actually every single council member that has ever spoken on affordable housing has talked about how we've always been ahead of the curve. So the irony sometimes when I hear that we've always been ahead of the curve, that now we're behind the curve. And as I know that you don't have all the updates on Mount Laurel, it is a committee that was formed in confidence with all the appropriate professionals from the city and through council, and you will have an update soon. But we are talking very much on how do we close out round 3 and how do we prepare for round 4, because we understand that there are going to be some challenges ahead. So in earnest, we are all working very hard to get to the right place as we close out round 3. And maybe 7 to 10 isn't 42, but that doesn't mean that we don't value it, that we don't want to support affordable housing. I personally believe, and I've said this to you, Mark, I personally believe the spirit of Mount Laurel is to ensure that we embed it into the fabric of our community in all places. And that's where I will always fall on that spectrum. And it's not probably what people want to hear in terms of who support a 42-unit affordable housing building, but I just personally feel as though we need to live up to the master plan, the inclusionary, and work towards what are the 10 years going to look like in this community where everybody can walk out of their house and nobody knows what affordable house, which is the affordable house and which is not. In one big building, it will be very clear. And so that's where my heart is, and I think that's really important for me to share that with you. I've been up here for 2 years, and to allay the fear that this just happened overnight, it did not happen overnight. I have listened for 2 years, and many of us have, so I'm not just saying just me, but for 2 years, it's too tall, it's too long, it's not quite parked, and that we need to break up the buildings, we need setbacks. I've heard a lot of feedback, and I want to thank our professionals because as I said before, I've learned a ton. And I actually continue every single day to appreciate affordable housing more, and development and land use, and appreciate how hard this city has worked. When Councilwoman Hamlet talks about Matt and all the reporting he has done, he is a one-person full-time employee that almost works 2 jobs. Because of all the amount of work he puts into affordable housing and the discussions he has and the tracking, in which there is an enormous amount that has fallen, that is going to be required of the city over the next year to ensure that we meet all those regulations. So we're in it, we're working on it, and I just don't want to be dismissive in terms of how I feel about the affordable housing. So I'm just going to go into my quick speech. So what does this overlay provide? It provides balance among a diversity of interests that together we are working to reconcile. As elected officials, I know that there are different groups that always come at different times in this council chamber, and someone said that he loved being in this council chamber. Sometimes it is the hot seat, because there are so many competing interests, and I'm a pleaser, so I always want to please people, but we need to make decisions that actually are holistic. And a former councilman had said, he's already left, but he said, when Summit wins, we all win, or when we win, Summit wins. And that's my goal. for the time that I'm in this position. Throughout this process, we have worked closely with our city planner and appropriate professionals to ensure this overlay balances the community's evolving needs. Our planners and team of city professionals have carefully reviewed other overlay zone sites around town, considered recent board applications that have been approved based on robust public input, as Elliot knows, and look back on years of dialogue on the potential for this site. 10 years, but 2 specifically in mind. This ordinance is a direct reflection of that comprehensive review. Why is the overlay beneficial, in my view? The overlay zone is not development. So to erase this idea, we are not development. We are out of the business of development. We're out of the business of development. We're out of the business of development. We're not developing, and that has to be absolutely clear. There is not a single nail or piece of wood that this city is laying on that land. So it's an overlay zone that sets certain parameters, that balances the diversity of priorities referenced before. Revenue, we have roughly $1 million a year that we're going to be having to pay for the firehouse in Cedar, affordable housing, green space, and that, by the way, the green space, this is really important to me. Why? Because as more development happens, our trees are disappearing. And I cannot tell you how many properties are flooding. As someone who cares about our environment, it is tragic that green space has been disappearing as it has. And I know I'm running long, but this is actually an important point. We just went to the Arboretum's 50th anniversary. It is an amazing feat between the city and 2 families who came together and preserved 13.5 acres so that this community, from anybody from all backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, can go to the Arboretum and they can enjoy it. So in an era where we are continuing to build and our green space is disappearing, 50 years ago, the Arboretum is a beacon of what we talk about in environmentalism. So somehow we have to balance that. And David Hoffman, I don't know if you're still in this room, but God love you, because I would love a bowling alley. I would love a park. I would love recreation for senior citizens, for children's, for families, for couples, whoever. Like, I would love that. But 1, financially it's difficult, and 2, it doesn't incorporate affordable housing. And that's a real need in our community. But I want to thank you for coming and speaking up numerous times, because I absolutely appreciate your vision. Okay, I'm almost done. This is important to me, and I think this has been a culmination for me for several years of being on this dais. And tonight is a final, I'm putting this to rest after tonight. Why is this overlay beneficial? I told you it's not development. The proposed enhancements in this zone, if implemented, will provide significant advantages to sell the land as is and generate necessary revenue for 7 Cedar and the existing firehouse. Careful review of all bids submitted, including the sale price and vision for the site, are critical, as well as the long-term property tax revenue. Our jobs as elected officials is to work in the best interests of our community. Again, I want to make everyone happy. I know I'm not going to. But what I can do, and actually what I would say is, some want more density, some want less. Some want more parking, some want less. Some want exclusive affordable housing, some want more inclusionary development. Some want recreation, some want just residential. And as elected officials, we're sitting here listening to all those desires and needs, and we are committed. We have to be committed to whatever the decision is. We need to make it and move forward. We cannot let this property go sit for much longer, because at the end of the day, it's still going to take time to build. Once you sell it, it's still going to take time. So if we don't do something now, by the way, the fire trucks are pulling out soon, another month or 2. I'll give it 2. But when those fire trucks pull out, it's going to sit empty. And I feel it's derelict of my duty as an elected official to let it sit empty, because we can't make a decision that we've listened to this issue for years. We've listened to it. I'm almost done. I really want to finish my statement. as some would say, we have to continue. I don't want to get caught in paralysis analysis, Diego. That's why we've leaned on our professionals, and what we have done is create a solution that is palatable, and it's deliberated by our community over and over again. This overlay zone responds to what has already been expressed and allows us to build positive momentum without closing any doors. This is a positive chapter. It is not what everybody wanted in all aspects, but it's compromise. For me, this is compromise. Everybody gets a little something. And that is grace and mercy. Public participation has been and will continue to be a crucial part of this process. Members of the as Mr. Behrens has said, there's going to be moments for public input, and I can't thank everybody enough for the continued engagement and commitment to making Summit a better place always. So I'm going to support the overlay zone, and I can't thank you enough, Mr. Burgess, Nancy, Ms. Holmes, and Tom, Michael Rogers, and all the city staff, Matt DeLore, for everything that you've done and how you've educated all of us. And you've done it in a way to help us come along and be able to form our own opinions in a very educated way. So thank you. Okay. So with that said, give me 1 second. Sorry. I just have to find it.
While you're looking, may I?
Oh, yes, Mayor, please.
Thank you. I want to reiterate again to thank everybody that came to speak tonight, and also to thank our professionals. Again, I know this was a lot of work, but I know that, I trust that what you say is that it's a well thought out, really well planned overlay zone that accomplishes a balance of competing interests. And so I'm very appreciative. And lastly, I think the sooner we sell the properties and somebody comes and wants to build units, the sooner we get existing affordable units. That's the math in my head, so, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, Madam Clerk. So, yep, Madam Clerk, please read the ordinance for final consideration.
Ordinance number 24-3319, ordinance of the City of Summit, County of Union, New Jersey, amending Chapter 35, Development Regulations by creating a new Morris Broad Crossroads Overlay Zone District.
Okay, Councilwoman Hamlet.
I just put all my papers away. Okay. Sorry. Sorry, I forgot I had to, I'm rereading a very brief version. This is ordinance 24-3319, ordinance of the City of Summit, County of Union, New Jersey, amending Chapter 35 Developmental Regulations by creating a new Morris Broad Overlay Zone District. I would like to move this ordinance.
Okay.
For final
For final
consideration.
Final consideration.
Second.
Wonderful. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Boyer?
Yay.
Ms. Hamlet?
Aye.
Mr. Miniger?
Nay.
Mr. Pulaski?
Aye.
Mr. Smallwood?
Aye.
Mr. Vartan?
Nay.
President Allen?
Aye. Motion carries. Before everybody runs away, we have a public comment of anything not on the agenda. Oh, my God. No, come. Okay.
I do have a comment. My name is Diego Hoyt. I'm an Argo Cortez Summit, for those who care. So, as many of you know, I came of age in a dictatorship. And then I came to the United States to go to college, where I had the privilege to attend Columbia University, where the late Jack Greenberg was its dean. The name may not ring a bell, but together with Thurgood Marshall, he argued Brown versus Board of Education in front of the Supreme Court, desegregating schools in the South. I heard a lot of talks about the civil rights movement when I was at Columbia. I am incredibly thankful to live under the protection of our Constitution. The Supreme Court of the land has a First Amendment that reads, in part, Congress shall make no law respecting the right of people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. During the civil rights era, civil rights legislation eliminated a lot of Jim Crow laws that limited the right to assemble via mechanisms similar to insurance requirements. May I ask that you please consult with a civil rights lawyer, not an administrative lawyer, or the ACLU before limiting the right of people to peacefully assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. It is a minefield. Civil law legislation is still the law of the land and its jurisprudence. And by limiting people's right to speak, you could potentially be putting the city at risk. Thank you.
Thank you. No? Okay. Okay. Any other public comment? All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay.